It is day 2 of Beastmen Week, and we're here with the full breakdown of the Arcane Journal. I do like to have some time to sift through, let it marinate, make sure that I actually understand what I'm reading, which is why these aren't normally the day 1 video, they normally come day 2 or day 3. And obviously we have a phenomenal Beastman player on Team England, who is currently in Italy, the bastard. So we won't be talking to him, but never fear, because I still have an international Beastman player. I'm talking to Team America's Beastman player, Jeff. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing quite well, even better since the Beastman book is out and I get to read all these juicy details.
They're fantastic, aren't they? I think this is the journal that people have been the most hyped for since probably Empire, and I don't think Empire really met people's expectations in the way that this book seems to have done so far.
I think that's just one of the challenges of journals is that they're an amplification, hopefully, of what you already start with. Empire got a lot out of their journal. I think it's one
Mm.
of the best ones, but they started in a rough spot. Beastman started in a pretty good spot, and they also got a lot out of their journal. So this book is great.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary. So, are you feeling happy with the book? Just sort of a general vibe check. How are you feeling, scale of 1 to 10, going into this?
I think the AOI are better than I thought, but
Mhm.
not terribly exciting, competitively speaking.
Sure.
The magic items exceed my wildest dreams. There's so much, I don't even know where to start. So many new toys, I can't fit them all in.
Yeah.
It's exciting and frustrating at the same time. The units are the only part I'm a bit down on. There's some cool stuff in there, and it's not all bad, but there's nothing that I'm really like, oh man, I'm so excited to start putting this together. This is going to be great.
Sure, I think that's fair. I think there's probably one of the units is going to be good in a certain combination of rules, and I haven't quite worked out which one it is yet. But there will be something in there. It's just finding, the key to unlock it, because it's like Royal Host. When Royal Host was launched, nobody was playing it, and then suddenly 6 months later, here's a list where we take 180 skeletons with poison. I'm not saying it's going to be as good as Royal Host, but I feel like it reads to me that you can do weird things with the units in a similar sort of way to Royal Host that you don't normally think about, and it might take a little while for us to wrap our heads around and go, actually, if I do this, that's quite good.
I agree. I think there's some sleeper potential in there. And I should note that when I say I don't think any of the units are immediately jump out at me, there's one thing in the book that jumps out to me that you can pay points for that isn't a unit per se. That I am very excited about and already have lists together with. Been brewing with our high elf player. I'm very excited.
I wonder which unit, which Herdstone shaped unit that could possibly
It could be
be.
anything.
We're gonna have a lot
Partially
of
because yeah,
we're
the
gonna have a
person can
lot
be
of
whatever shape you want it to be.
well, we're gonna have a lot of chat about that, and maybe this might be a video that is a plea, a call to action for tournament organizers everywhere. So, but we'll save that until we reach it in the book. So
Yes.
let's go through, and we're going to start off with my personal favorite, because I just kind of like big dumb idiots that are quite tanky and hit really hard, and that is the Minotaur Bloodherd. Now, this does suffer from the classic you can't have a level 4 wizard, but it does have actual magic defense in a way that I'm less bothered about this not having a level 4 than I am some of the other arcane journals. So you start off and you can take 0 to 1 Doom Ball per 1,000 points. That's pretty solid because you're not competing with wizards, so let's just have 2 Lord level characters. You can have 0 to 1 Bray Shaman per 1,000 points. That's your level 1 or level 2 wizard, which is fine. They're limited, but I'm not going to take 3 of them. Not in this detachment. That's not what I'm trying to do. And then you can have uncapped Gorbles, Wargors, and Centaur Chieftains. What do you feel about the characters?
Characters are exactly what I expected out of the list. I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, it would be better if you could take a Great Bray Shaman, but this is what this list is all about. And I agree. I think you have some strong magic defense options with Beastman, especially with some of the items later in the book, that I don't think is going to be a top tier competitive list, but there's a lot of play to this. I think you can make a really solid build and do well with it. Doom Bulls are great. I love running a Doom Bull. You can run them in a lot of different configurations. You can run them with different units. They do work,
Yeah.
and they surprise people.
Yeah, although normally you run them in a brick of Gore or Ungor, depending on how, you might be
You do. I
structuring
think
this.
they definitely shine there,
Yeah.
but I think there's play in different areas
Yeah, because this
that
time
are
around
not
I want to
explored.
run them in a brick of Minotaurs, but we can
Oh,
get into those.
100%. Yeah.
I'm a little shocked to see Centaur Chieftains, and I don't know why, because thematically, as soon as you see it, you're like, actually, no, that makes perfect sense. But, and, don't get me wrong, I don't think Centaur are good, even with the changes that you can bring to them in this book. But I was looking at that, I was like, oh, that's slightly more choice than I thought they would get. And I wasn't sure they'd get Wargors either. I was kind of expecting it to be just, here's the Minotaur characters, and here's like a level 2 wizard, and that was going to be the lot of characters.
Yeah, I think it makes sense because there isn't. It's Minotaurs. It's not like there's so much variety. I mean, you look at trolls, for example.
Yeah.
If you had a troll, you have troll characters and things like that that are new to the book. They just have a lot of. There's so many different types of trolls that you can have in your core and at different parts of the army. Whereas Minotaurs are just it's Minotaurs and the Minotaur characters, so you need something else to round it out.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get rid of Gore and Ungore, which means that the Gore or the War Gore kind of fits in there too.
Sure, yeah, that's fair. I look at this army as Troll Horde, but Troll Horde that leans into damage instead of resistance. I think that's the feel of it for me as an army of infamy. So, coming into core, and both armies, unfortunately, are hit with the core tax. You have to take at least 33% of your army's points. I'm actually not too upset in this detachment because you have to take at least 1 Minotaur herd per 1,000 points in core, and then you can have 0 to 1 Herdstone, which again costs 100 points, so that's probably just going in every list, and then you can have Gore herd, Ungore herds, and Chaos War Hounds. So I feel it's actually pretty easy to spend 660 points in this detachment.
I think in Beastmen lists it's often just Grand Army. Beastmen have good core in general. Now you don't have Razor Gore here. That's the big one that's missing, right? But Minotaurs are solid. The Herdstone being core is excellent. That makes it a lot. In fact, that brings you down to 566, so it's barely a core tax at all, assuming you're taking one of those.
True. Yeah, well, it's not even 566, just 560. We can shave those 6 points off. Really efficient.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've been writing a couple of lists, and I have overcapped on core because I wanted to put a Herdstone in, so I've not found particularly many issues with that.
No, I don't think we'll have trouble with this in either Armor of Infamy.
Yeah. Up to special, we've got 0 to 1 unit of Dragon Ogres per 1,000 points, which is technically limited, but I think realistically, in this detachment, you're not going to get more than 2 units of Dragon Ogres, even if you go for 2 Shartax. I think
You're already taking 2 units of Minotaurs in a 2,000 point list. How many units of monstrous? They're cavalry, but monstrous infantry do you really need in an army?
More. Always more.
That's true.
Then you can take Harpies, more Minotaur herds apart from the 2 you have to take, Centaur herds, Razor Gores, and Gorgons as well. Gorgons in special is interesting. So this is a detachment that theoretically can go pretty heavy on the Monster Mash, just outside of that quite heavy core tax there.
Yeah, you could just straight up take 4 Gorgons in core. They're 245 each. You could take 1,000 points in Gorgons if you were feeling crazy about it.
That is a lot of Gorgons in special. It's I mean, obviously most places play with rule of 3, but if you weren't and you wanted to take 4 Gorgons, I mean, that is a choice that you can make, I guess.
It is, and perhaps more notably, if we go to rare, you can take a Shaggoth, which got better.
Yes.
Chaos Giants, Chaos Ogres, and Trolls. Gorgons don't conflict at all with your Shaggoth. So if you wanted to take a Shaggoth and 2 Gorgons, for example, that's very accessible here, whereas that's harder to pull off in Grand Army. You're a lot more capped on what you can put on the Shaggoth magic item, things like that. Here, the Shaggoth could be your only guy in rare. You could take a couple, you have 33%, and still take 2 Gorgons in special. It gives you a lot more flex with monsters like the Shaggoth that aren't just a static cost, but have some options and upgrades available to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get to why, you know, the magic items down the line, but there is a 40-point extremely common full plate that you can buy for your Shaggoths that also gives you a 5 ward save, and that makes me way more excited to put them on the table than I was beforehand, and I already kind of wanted to put them on the table.
Yeah, they're just a solid kind of all-around monster. They really need that 2+ armor save, but they were torn between the 2+ and the 5 armor and the 5+ ward, especially because you could only give it to one. I mean, you could give it to a second one, but it was very expensive. It didn't work very well. Now you can equip them both the same way and have them both be very beefy, especially assuming you have a 33% core limit or rare limit. And yeah, they're very tanky for monsters.
Yeah, absolutely. BSB, you can have a Gorble or Wargore be the battle standard bearer. This is interesting. I kind of would have just assumed it was going to be Gorble, but you can still do the poison shooting on Gorbrick if you want to. I don't necessarily know that this is the detachment to do it without, you know, reliable access to travel mystical pathways, but if you want to make your list a little bit less two-dimensional, you can still go for that classic Wargore that's quite cheap BSB, or if you are, you know, a real beefy boy, you can take a unit of Minotaurs with a BSB that's also a Minotaur, and I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean, the Minotaur BSB is a genuine upgrade. It's 2 more wounds. He slaps in combat. He's not that much more expensive. I think they're 130 instead of 55. It
Yeah.
makes instead of being like, all right, we're gonna charge him, we're gonna see if we can kill the BSB. We'll get rid of whatever special effect it has in the expensive banner. That BSB is a Minotaur, baby. He is, 700 pounds of pure beef and anger. He is not going down easy. Whatever unit he's in, it is tough because even if you focus fire on him,
Yeah.
maybe you're going to do 2 or you can do 3 wounds. He's not dead. He's hitting you back, and now you haven't taken any wounds off of the unit. He's harder to hit than the rest of the unit. That's a scary guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone who watched yesterday's video where I go through different builds, you can have basically an Ogre Blade equivalent Minotaur with a 25-point magic item, which I think is pretty neat. We'll get to the magic items later on, but the fact that you can have that, and then also if you roll a double on your I always get the
Primal
names
Fury,
wrong.
yeah.
Primal Fury. If you roll a double one on your Primal Fury, then great, you get an extra 2 attacks because you're frenzied and blood rage. So suddenly you've got a 6-attack Ogre Blade, which is wild, just because that's your BSB that's not even spent all
Right,
that
yeah,
many
your
points.
your BSB is beating the shit out of somebody's dragon. There's not many lists where you get to say that's the case. Even lists where you can run the BSB on a griffin are still terrified, but that's a scary prospect. And he's
Yeah.
still rolling Eye of the Gods, so he starts at strength 5. He can easily go up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a good time to ask about Eye of the Gods. So Eye of the Gods is a little bit riskier for Beastmen, and we didn't see a Favor of the Gods style magic item like Warriors of Chaos have, which makes sense because Beastmen are the sort of forgotten, forlorn sons of Chaos. But it does mean that you are inherently risking every time you roll on that Eye of the Gods, getting that one rolling stupidity, and Beastmen do have lower leadership across the board if you're not leaning on Warband. Do you typically roll stupidity, or I say stupidity? Do you typically roll on the Eye of the Gods table from turn 1?
The answer to both of those is yes. um, so when I'm running my list for context is the characters are a Doom Bull, a Warcore BSB, a level 4, and a level 2. That's what I've been running in the WTC. And I will typically start by rolling on the Doom Bull always, 100% of the time, rolls every single turn of the game. The BSB I will often roll on, and depending on the matchup and how likely I am to potentially move the character out of the unit, I will also roll on the level 4. The level 2 I don't typically roll on until late game when you're already in combat or you don't care, it doesn't matter for whatever reason, you might as well. Um, the thing is that I think Beastmen are less punished by the low rolls or the rolling the 1 for a few reasons.
Mm.
I'm running a big brick of guys, but your leadership 10 almost all the time. If you're not leadership 10, it's because you're disrupted and then you're in combat and it does not matter. So that's a big upgrade over a leadership 9 Chaos Lord. You're much less scared of that. And I'm also running them in a unit of Ungor. So you can walk them forward 5 and then do your quick turn from open order. So they're remarkably flexible even when stupid, which is quite a phrase. So they have a lot of going for them in that sense.
Sure.
And also, if you got 4 characters in one unit, once one of them has rolled stupid, baby, they're all stupid. You might as well keep rolling with the rest of them. You've got nothing to lose.
I mean, that's an interesting perspective. That I maybe if I've got stupidity on the not the Doom Bull, let's say the Wargore, maybe if I've got stupidity there, I don't roll it again. Actually, no, because you don't care about his leadership because you've already got higher leadership elsewhere. Yes,
Even if the Doom Bull is stupid, it's not great. But the thing is, if he goes into leadership 7, he's still leadership 10 because of Warband. So you have to roll 3 ones before it matters. And even then,
Yeah.
the Great Bray Shaman is still giving the unit itself, which is your most important part of my list, is still giving it leadership 10. So you have to be astronomically unlucky. And yeah, if you've rolled nothing but ones all game, maybe you stop because something's wrong and you've committed some kind of sin against the Chaos Gods and they've cursed you. Slow down then, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, I roll more as the game goes on rather than less.
That's fair. All right. So the Minotaur Bloodherd rules, because obviously they do come with rules, and as a classic, we do have a rule that is a downside to start us off. So Bloodshed and Butchery, all Doom Bulls, Gore Bulls, Minotaur Herds, and Gore Herds gain Impetuous. I mean, this is kind of fine. I think all of those units generally want to be just playing quite aggressively. And I find that if I'm Impetuous, I don't typically get Impetuous baited, whereas I do get Frenzy baited. Because it's a 50-50 as to whether you have to charge. people put less effort into putting something like Warhounds that are going to run away in front of a unit that may or may not fail Impetuosity. So I'm not too bothered about that.
No, I mean, if you're playing a Minotaur list, you are here to run cows up into somebody's face. You're not here to not charge. So it is a little bit frustrating if you've got skirmish gores in your backfield or something like that, and somebody flies something up next to them. But even then, if somebody flies something like Fellbats or Wolf Riders or runs little chaff units near your Gore herd, one, the Gore herd is very cheap. Two, the Gore herd's great at dealing with that kind of stuff. So it's really not that fussed then.
Sure.
The only time it's going to be really frustrating is when somebody flies up a dragon in front of your Minotaur unit, and you can't fight it. Maybe it's the Minotaur unit without any characters in it, and that could be frustrating for them then. But I mean, as we'll see when we get to the next rule, they might be frenzied anyway. So the impetus is not that painful. You're rolling. You've got a 5 in 36 chance to become frenzied permanently every round of combat that you fight.
Yep.
And I mean, even then, like Minotaurs, they're not that deeply expensive. If you're running a small unit, then I don't know, they can still do damage. And as James Warcraft has told us, a Minotaur with Great Weapon will beat up that dragon, so it's not a problem even then.
Yeah, I mean, so Doombulls are one of the few characters on foot that you can equip to make dragons genuinely go, hold on now. I'm not necessarily tangling with that. That's scary.
Yeah, 100%. Doomghouls will... There are some dragons where they can hold the line and take very little damage when on combat res. There are other dragons where they will beat the shit out of that dragon while also giving the dragon very little combat res.
Yeah.
Depending on how they're equipped, if it's more defensive or more offensive, both of which are very reasonable to do. If you're the one charging, you're getting impact hits and things like that. It's terrifying to have Minotaurs hitting you, getting the armor penetrating impact hits and striking first, and just... There are situations where the Impetuous is bad, but it's not like Impetuous with, Wolf Riders with bows, where you don't ever want them in combat in the first place.
Yeah.
These are units that the whole point in their list is to get stuck in and beat somebody up. So obviously I prefer to not have Impetuous, but I don't think it's deeply impactful in this list the way it would be in some others.
I agree. Second rule, Champion of Slaughter. Whenever the general becomes frenzied as a result of Blood Rage, any friendly units within command range will also become frenzied, which is not just Minotaurs. You could be like, oh, you know what? I got some Warhounds in marching column next to me. Did I get frenzied? Yeah, I did. Oop, these dogs are out.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, things that normally wouldn't be able to get frenzied, whatever it is. Just goes for it.
Yeah.
And again, in this sort of a list that's potentially very powerful, you can do a lot with that. Minotaurs getting +2 attacks when frenzied is terrifying. It's so much damage.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the hardest parts about that is you can't get that consistently. So the general still can't get that consistency on his own. But you can do things like the Banner of Outrage, which lets you reroll Primal Fury to make it more consistent for him. And then if he does, then the army just goes, and suddenly you've got 5 attacks per model with strength 5 at least without great weapons, and armor pen 2, and I like this roll a lot. It's also very flavorful. The Minotaur goes crazy. Normally Minotaurs, when they frenzy their whole unit. Yep. So this is really just an extension of that. He frenzies the army around him.
Which seems super reasonable to me. He's out for blood. Next up, we've got Guardians of the Herdstone, and this says that Doomghouls and Gorbulls in the Blood Herd may take Chaos Mutations and or Gifts of Chaos from the Warriors of Chaos list up to a total of 50 points, instead of just the normal mutations. So I've talked about this already, but do you have any favourite combinations, or is there anything in there that makes you go, oh, this is actually something I can build around?
The obvious one is the Strike's Last Aura. It's excellent no matter who you're taking it on.
Yeah.
And that lets you make a more offensive Doombull that's more likely to get to fight, even if he's not kitted out to be as defensive. That also pairs very easily with the +1 armor save mutation from Beastmen, which is just generally great. Also, honestly, the poison is not bad to have either. It's just nice to have a little bit of consistency. You're already rolling ones. Depends on what you're hitting, but it's pretty cheap. I don't think it's that crazy. I think the Strike's Last one is the big takeaway from this.
I agree.
But having the flexibility on it is not bad. There's a few things on the list that you might not take on a Chaos Lord because he's already taking something else. But here, maybe it's worth taking on a Gorbull BSB just to have some more flexibility in how he's kitted.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, I really like Enchanting Aura. The other one is the Diabolic Splendor for the -1 to be shot. Do I think this is good? Not necessarily. Is there a second version of this for Beastman already in the Chaos Mutation? It's like Pelt of Midnight or something like that. So
Yes.
you can have
Yeah.
two Minotaurs with in your Death Star, and you can make the unit -2 to be shot. Is that worth doing? Almost certainly no. Is that really funny if you're if you only play against dwarves who use loads of Iron Drakes and ranges? Yeah. I think that's pretty funny at that point.
Dwarfs, wood elves, dark elves. It's not
Sure.
the most common list you'll see. If Arrows of Asaph were not a rule, I'd be much more excited by the combination. But unfortunately, it isn't,
Man,
and it's real good.
if only there was a way to deal with that. Maybe we'll get to that later in the
I
book.
don't know if we have the technology, Ed, but we'll see if we can scrummage something up.
We have the technology. Finally, speaking of magic, there is magic of the dark gods. The general of a blood herd must be a Doombull or Gorbel, and they can be a level 1 wizard for 35 points, or for 65 points, they can be a level 2 wizard. You know spells from battle magic or dark magic. You can wear armor without penalty. You can have battle magic in Beastman. This is great. Is this the way that I want to get battle magic? No, it's not. But, I'm still going to take it. Like, I want Arcane Urgency Minotaurs up the board. I want to move 24 inches turn 1. What's she going to do? Die.
Yeah, I mean, battle magic is excellent. It's especially nice for a list that wants to be aggressive like this.
Yeah.
It's got a great signature. Worth noting that they do not have access to the Beastman signature spells. They can't take Vile Tide. They do not have the
Mantle of
I
Gorok.
forget yeah, Mantle of Gorok is the one people were really hoping for,
It's so
but
funny.
they don't have the special rule that allows them to take that. So but with that said, Hammerhand's still really good on a unit that wants to be in combat as much of the game as possible.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I think I'm just dry rolling on battle magic, and if I get Oaken Shield or Arcane Urgency, I'm super jazzed. If I get Pillar of Fire, I'll throw it off. If I get anything else, I'm going Hammer Hand and yeah, sure, whatever. I'm not too bothered. This is. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, go ahead. I was gonna say, I still people were talking about the Minotaur character with marching column and jagged dagger. So you march up and then you pop a spell at the start of the turn to murder one of your own Minotaurs for +3 to cast.
Yeah.
15 points for the item and 50 points for the Minotaur, but it does let you marching column up, cast an enchantment or hex at the start of your turn, and then just go, which is very funny. I don't know if
It's not good.
powerful, but it's really, really funny.
So I've had to talk Tom down a lot from the jagged dagger because he's like, but it's +3 to cast. I'm like, yeah, but it's like 50 points per pop because you're killing a Minotaur.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Honestly, there probably is some utilization for it, but it just me as a player taking out potentially like a quarter of my unit that I've spent 250 points on after I put in command and stuff, that makes me sweat just a little bit too much to want to go for that. I really like this because it is actual magic defense, because you can make your general, who is melee, who wants to be up in the thick of it, a wizard. And there is an item, which we will talk about probably later, that makes you count as your the opposing wizard's level +1 when you dispel a spell. So, yes, you're only level 2, and you only have an 18-inch dispel bubble. But if you're in range and they're casting as a level 4, you dispel as a level 5, so you're rolling +5. That stops enough stuff getting through that I think it's enough magic defense. Let's be honest, even if you've got a level 4, unless you're playing one of the armies, like you've got Wood Elf Oakenstave, you've got Warriors of Chaos, Infernal Puppet, how many spells are you actually dispelling? It's a lot less than you think it might be. So I like this as an option for defense.
I agree. I think it's solid, and that if you get that +5, the things it won't stop everything,
Sure.
but it stops the things you care about most, like the illusion magic, which will just shut down a Minotaur block.
Yeah.
Having a +5 to roll versus that is really important, and I love that you have the option. That was one of the things I was worried about with the Minotaur list, is that sure, you're not going to have the range output with Vile Tides and things like that. And that makes sense. Minotaurs are here for literal bloodshed, so. But having the ability to not get completely boxed out of the game by somebody with controlling magic is lovely. I'm glad they did that. It makes the army just a lot more well-rounded in how it plays, and it makes sense to me that they would do it that way.
Absolutely. You have your Death Star with this character in, with the plus, cast dispelling at level 5. You also have Magic Resist 2 in the unit. Job's a good one. You're probably not getting Miasmic Mirage. That's going to keep you safe. So big fan of that. Put all of your eggs in one basket. When has that ever gone wrong? Never, I tell you, never.
I don't think historically there's ever been a precedent for going wrong. So.
It's not even a phrase about it. We wouldn't know. But moving on to the the eggs all in one basket detachment, I think it's fair to call it that. This is the Beastmen Herds Wild Herd. Now, you could also call this the Beastmen Herds Viletide Detachment, and it does lots of things. But the first thing that I want to do when I look at this is go, kind of want to cast 5 Viletides a turn. Sure, it'd be a shame if I blew you and myself up. That would suck. I think it's an interesting one. So we'll go through. You've got a fairly similar sort of breakdown in characters. You can have 0 to 1 Beast Lord or Great Bray Shaman per 1,000 points. And then you can have Wargors, Bray Shamans, and Centaur Chieftains. So no Minotaurs, but that's fine. Let's not be greedy. We had an entire detachment for them there. I don't think we're missing anything else here, are we?
No, I think that's fine. This is the list. If you want to play a list with a mix of stuff, then that's what the Grand Armory is for. This is saying I want to run heavy casters, monstrous, weird nonsense, lots of magic and spooky dark things in the woods. This is a very fun, very flavorful list that they put in.
Absolutely. Speaking of things that go bump in the night, we've got Core, and it's 33% of your army, 660 points. Woo! Once you're over that jump scare, you can take 1+ unit of Primal War Herd, 0 to 1 Tusk or Chariot. That's fine. I think I only ever really took 2 in Grand Army, so I'm not too bothered about that.
Yeah,
0 to 1 Centaur Herd may be taken as a core choice per Centaur Chieftain taken, so that's an interesting thing that you can do. And then there's also Gore Herds, Ungor, Warhounds, Primal War Hounds, and Razor Gore Herds. So basically, this is the place where you find all of the new units that we haven't quite figured out which one's going to be busted OP.
Yeah, and this is very similar. You've got a few more restrictions, like the Tusk Chariot limit is not a huge deal. Centaurs are an option. You might not take advantage of it, but it's there. But the rest of it is almost identical to or slightly expanded from the Grand Army. You've got a lot of core options here. The only thing you're missing are that you can't take the 0 to 1 per 1,000 on Minotaurs, which I don't even think are an option in this army at all.
No.
Or Bestigor if you have a Beast Lord General, or some of the monsters that could go in special if you have the Bray Shaman General that you have in Grand Army. But generally speaking, the core is pretty similar, and if not expanded a little bit with the units.
Yeah, you can still go for 3 Razor Gore, 2 Tusk Chariots, and then 1 mandatory unit of some sort of Gore. So, don't worry. This is very familiar to those of you who've been playing Beastmen. Moving on to special, we can have 0 to 1 unit of Dragon Ogres, not per 1,000 points, just 0 to 1. So that is a little bit limiting here, which I think is okay. We can have Warped Gore, Bestigor, Harpies, Centaur, Tusk Chariots, and Razor Gore Chariots. So if you wanted more Tusk Chariots than the core, you can take them in special. And then you can also have 0 to 1 Cockatrice and the Preton per 1,000 points. And I do actually quite like the Preton, although it may be just a tad on the pricey end for what it does. We'll get to that one.
Yeah, that was my take as well. But it's fun. Yeah, I mean, you've got most of your classic stuff here. So.
Yeah. So that all makes sense. And then rare, again, 33% in the rare. Both armies do allow you to take an expanded rare pool, which is nice because Beastmen do thematically lean into that Monster Mash style. And you can take the Shaggoths, the Jabberslythe, the Cygors, and Chaos Giants, and then also Chaos Spawn from the Warriors of Chaos army list, which I think is fine. Chaos Spawn are interesting. I haven't actually looked at whether there's a way to really make them worth taking in Beastmen, so maybe that's something that I need to look into, because I think they're interesting.
They're a bit slow. Is really the issue you run into them? Why reason you see the gigantic spawn, which are notably not in either army. They're Grand only.
Yeah, I did see you have a point written out earlier that it doesn't really make sense for them to reference another Arcane journal for this Arcane journal, which I think makes perfect sense as to why they don't get them.
Yeah. The Chaos Spawn are interesting. I think if you can play a more defensive build, then they have more play because they're a response unit. They're not an aggressive unit because they're not that fast, but you can take Killing Blow on them, and they're a little bit flexible in that I believe they're open orders, so they can make a quick turn after they move as long as they don't march, which they can't march, so they always get their pivot, which is nice when you're running a unit like Spawn that really needs that movement flexibility.
Yeah.
And if there's going to be a defensive, more range-focused Beastman build, it's this army. You can take a lot of Shamans, which is where a lot of your range output comes in. So I think they're interesting. I don't know if we'll see them. Yeah, but there's some neat stuff you can do with Spawn. Shaggoths are the main interest here. Cygors are quite bad. Chaos Giants are better than Cygors, but they're just
I
kind
don't
of
know that they are, honestly. Cygors can at least affect the battle from range. Not particularly well.
yeah, that's true. I guess Chaos Giants at least do some kind of damage
Yeah.
in melee. So they're bad in different ways.
We've
I don't
got
think we
three
need to belabor this
monsters
one too much.
three
Yeah,
monsters we won't take, and then we've also got the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth.
that's exactly it. It's the same as the other list. That's the one that you're more interested in. And again, you can take two of them with some decent magic items because you have a 33% limit, which makes you more flexible there.
Absolutely. Again, just a classic Wargore as your BSB, and you can take the classic magic items as well. But what rules do we get for the Wild Herd? And I keep wanting to call it the Primal Herd, but Wild Herd is the rule. In addition to the lore of magic they normally know, Beastman Shamans may have spells from the lore of primal magic. This is what you'd expect to see if you get a new lore of magic in your detachment, in your Arcane journal. So yeah, that's good, and we'll cover that one as we get to it. But then there's the spicy rule. Dark Coven. The shamans within a wild herd may attempt to leech power from nearby wizards when they attempt to cast a spell or attempting to wizardly dispel. So, this is optional. You do not have to do this on every spell cast. To do so, you may apply a +1 modifier to the casting or dispel roll for each other friendly wizard within command range. However, if they roll any natural double, something has gone wrong and the spell is miscast, or they have and the spell is miscast. Oh yeah, sorry, I just couldn't read that properly. So not only do you get the negative, you auto miscast when you roll any double. In such cases, you immediately roll on the table and apply the result to the wizard that took the test. But then you also apply the same result to every wizard in the command range that was buffing it up. So that's pretty nasty. And it's what, a 1 in 6 to roll a double.
1 to 6 exactly. So. Yeah. I am a little bit bummed that they added that last clause and it affects everybody. The flavor is immaculate. They're all 3 goats chanting in a dark coven. You guys are a little cabal of hairy shamans chanting. And when something goes wrong for one of them, it goes wrong for all of them at the same time.
Yeah.
It is a big difference between having... Because the thing is, it's at least, if you have 2 of them, it's only +1. So if you have 3 of them, +2, that's when it gets good. But then that's potentially triple miscast. Yeah. Now, this might make you play things a little bit differently. Level 2 Brave Shamans are toughness 4, so the strength 4 hit is not too bad. Especially for the level 4s, it's really not that bad. They don't take that much damage from the strength 4 hit. The strength 6 hit is a bit scarier, but again, maybe you've got some armor, some ward save, things like that. It's if you've got multiple characters in a strength in a unit, and you roll 2 to 4, the unit's just gone.
So the obvious answer here is that you don't put your wizards in units in this detachment. Yes. I think this is, if you're running wizards, you're running them on chariots and you're buying them chaos armor, and that is how we're going to deal with that problem. Oh no, I took a strength 10 hit. Well, I get wounded on a 2, I might save on a 5+. If not, I go from 7 wounds to 6 remaining. I can live with that. Whereas, as you very succinctly pointed out, have them in a unit, the unit's gone.
Alternatively, and hear me out here, putting them in a unit of Ungor and forcing yourself to miscast as you kill some Ungor on the unit and panic away from the enemy is the poor man's reserve move. So we have to keep our options open.
If you could guarantee that it happened on the last cast, I'd be with you there. But if I panic my unit away from the enemy on my first Vile Tide, I am fuming. Because the reason I've brought 4 Vile Tides is because I want my opponent to stop existing on this mortal plane. And if instead I'm running away from them before they get turned into soup, I'm very displeased about the state of affairs we have come to.
I think that's a key point about the casting. There's two points that really come to mind with this. One, the fewer casts you have remaining, the better this is to use. You want to be sequencing your casts. So the wizards who are likely to resolve their spells, the level 4s, are casting first and not using this. When you're casting this, you want to have your level 1 and 2 wizards getting maybe just a +1 or +2. They're casting their 1 or 2 damage spells later. It's going to be better to use this on things like Vile Tide, especially to overcome magic resist or dispels. This is very dangerous to use on enchantments and hexes, because in a list with 4 or 5 wizards, sometimes worse than causing damage to 3 wizards at once is ending the casting phase, and then that's it. You can't cast spells for the rest of the game, and all those goats with creepy robes on are doing nothing. That's brutal. So you really want to be selective about this.
Yeah. So
Um,
I think weirdly, this is a list where I'm going, okay, I've got a rule that buffs my wizards so they don't need support. How am I going to make sure this works? Okay, I'm going to buy loads of power scrolls. Which I understand increases the risk of miscast. I'm not comboing a power scroll with a dark coven, but I want to reliably get my spells off, but I also want to have the flexibility of being like, miscasting on any double, risk too high. I'm just going to power scroll it. Like, I want it to go off, but I don't want it to go off that badly. So I think that's kind of where I'm looking at with my many chariot, many brave shaman list.
I think the key with this rule is that it's not something you use necessarily every turn, or maybe only once or twice per turn. And it's more important. I think this is a better rule for Dispel because
Sure.
often you might have one important spell to cast, but it's a conveyance or an enchantment or a hex early in the turn, and that is potentially brutal if it miscastings goes wrong. But if your opponent has one spell, you've walked up on their unit of, let's say, 30 Sisters of Avalorn, and they're about to cast their Wicked Elf magic and just teleport with a Travel Mystical Pathway 12 or 30 some inches away, and you say, all right, the goods are going to get together and we're all going to have a +6 to dispel you. That's when this really shines for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to turn off stuff and then actually threaten to dispel against something like Mortuary Cult, where they're getting those massive pluses to cast. If they don't roll well, you can be like, actually, no, your important spell that was going to shut me down, we're not having that. We're going to get rid of that. I do like that, as you point out.
Yeah, I don't think it's good as something you want to just pop off all the time. Because to make it good, you have to have multiple casters, and then you can really mess yourself up.
Yeah.
But if you save it for the critical moment, it's just an option to have. It's purely optional, and that's the big thing about it. And it's nice to have that option if you need it.
Yeah, there's going to be some maths wizard who's going to work out when, like, it's worth doing, because it increases the chance of the miscast quite a lot. But you're going to be like, okay, so if the spell is a 9 to cast and you're only a level 2 and you want to reliably cast it, it's worth doing when there's 2 people in range, even though, you're risking your miscast increase by X amount. So there's going to be a way to work that out. And basically what I'm saying is someone do that for me, please.
Yeah, that's the other reason I like it on Dispel quite a bit, because when you're casting a spell, you know what you need to hit the spell value, but you don't know what your opponent's going to roll. When you're
Sure.
dispelling, you already know what they've rolled. So if they've cast a fireball and they rolled a 4 plus 4 is an 8, well, maybe you don't use this. You have a +4 on your own, you're likely to hit it.
Yeah.
But if it's a spell where you need to dispel it and they've rolled high, then you can be informed in advance. Am I more likely to dispel this with or without, and just run the numbers? It's just a pure math thing on an important spell, because you have all the information in front of you.
Makes sense to me. So, speaking of those power scrolls that I wanted, God, it's going to be hard to fit them in. Psych, Gifts from the Dark Gods. Character models can have an additional 25 points of magic items and additional 25 points of mutations. That's pretty neat.
You can make some interesting shamans with this, but you're usually not capped on magic items and shamans in general, although there are a lot of new magic items in the list you might want to include. I think where this really shines, if you want to run a Beast Lord or even a War Gore in your list, being able to go up to 75 is a big difference. There's some magic items you just couldn't take on before. Not that you necessarily want to, but you have the option. But a Beast Lord with 125 points of magic items and 75 points of mutations, uh, it's a lot. I mean, you see how Royal Host can really stack a character in ways that a regular dwarf list cannot, or not Royal Host, Royal Clans, excuse me.
Sure.
With that extra +25, it's a big difference. It lets you fit in combos that just don't exist in other armies with that allowance. So this is really interesting. I think it's going to take some time for people to figure out exactly what you can do with this, because you didn't even consider it before.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that it's the mutations as well, so you can take like a War Gore that's going to, potentially be there to add poison to a unit of Ungor. Cool, great, fantastic. But what if I just also give it Slug Skin and Gnarled Hide? Suddenly my model that's making it harder to hit the unit, giving that -1 to hit for all incoming attacks, is also just a bit harder to kill. So, it's harder for you to remove my force multiplier. I think it's those little things that we can build into lists over time that are going to be, as you point out, something we haven't thought about up until this point.
Yeah, 100%.
Roaming warbands. Within a wild herd army, any number of Gore, Ungore, Primal War Herds, and Centaur may have ambushes at +1 point per model. Any number of Beastmen Chieftains and Centaur Chieftains can have ambushes for 10 points per model, and additionally 0 to 1 Gore Herd, Ungore Herd, or Centaur Herd per 1,000 points with a unit strength of 10 or less may be given ambushes for free. Sure.
So the thing to note is that Gore, Ungore, and Centaurs can already take ambushers, as can Beastmen Chiefs and Centaurs.
Yeah.
Chieftains. You're limited to, I think, maybe 2 per army on the characters, but you rarely ambush those characters anyway. It's fine. If you want to run a full ambush list, this is here for you. It doesn't deeply change the way you play Beast, because in the Grand Army, you can ambush a lot of models just starting off. You can ambush almost the whole army. This just makes it a little bit easier. So if you want to lead into that, and you can get a couple units for free. Usually you're ambushing small units anyway, so it's nothing major, but it's nice to have.
In my mind, this gives you potentially 2 less drops as a flexibility. So, you're rocking up the table, you've got 11 or 12 drops, your opponent's playing a gun line and they've deliberately tried to go with loads so they can see what you're doing. Sure, maybe I put them down and then just go one less than them by putting something into ambush. I think just having that flexibility to be like, oh, actually, you've got 10 drops, I've got 11, I'm going to ambush 2. Job's a good one. Great, I get the +1 to go first, which is nice for aggressive pressure lists like Beastmen.
Yeah, it's just a nice option to have, and it's saving 10 or 20 points on the upgrade with the free ones is probably the best part of this. But the options, it's a point per model. That's the thing, is that you're not paying that much to give a unit of 5 or 8 Gore ambush. It's more expensive. You're running 10 Ungore because they're not that exciting to ambush in the first place. But even if you want to have the option to run more units, I mean, how many points are you really paying to have that flexibility? And being able to manipulate your drops in a competitive game is really interesting. Yeah. Even if you don't necessarily want the ambush part of it, then just it's nice to have that option and be able to do that sort of thing. And for free, then even better.
Yeah, that's where I'm pretty okay with ambush, when I don't have to pay points for it.
Yeah.
Right, okay, great. Those are 2 pretty interesting Arcane armies of infamy. I think the Wild Herd is maybe more competitive leaning at the moment. We'll see how things look after summer. But yeah, I like them both. I think they've done a good job, because obviously it's important for things to play well. You don't want things to be printed and just be bad. But I think also hitting the feel and getting some interesting rules is good. And I feel like both of these armies of infamy have hit the mark there and are worth taking just from a flavor perspective as well, which is cool.
Yeah, I agree. They both feel the rules really contribute to the way the army plays, and the way the army plays contributes to the flavor of the list that you're taking, things like that. I didn't think they did a great job with both of these.
Fantastic. All right, so let's talk about Herdstones. So we'll talk about how they work, and then we'll talk about how they probably shouldn't work, and we'll go through. So Herdstones are 0 to 1 per army. They're 100 points, and it's a unique type of special feature. Look into the special feature rules. You'll spend a good 5 minutes going, God, I didn't realize this existed. That it's no more than 6 inches wide at its widest point. Unless stated otherwise, a single Herdstone may be included as a special choice in any army made using an army composition list. It's impassable terrain and must be fielded as presented here. And then alternatively, for non-tournament or non-competitive games, you can just replace a special feature on your battlefield with the Herdstone, which is great for narrative style missions where you're like, oh, we want to defend the Herdstone or something like that. So, the way it's placed is once you've finished placing terrain and have rolled for deployment, the Beastmen Herds player whose muster list includes the Herdstone may place it on the battlefield. It's anywhere on the battlefield, not within your opponent's deployment zone, and not within 6 inches of the centre of the battlefield, which is pretty flexible. The Wood Elf Wood is 12 inches. And then, alternatively, if it's replacing a special feature, it'll go in as described by the scenario. Any thoughts on this?
The placement of impassable terrain that you can shape how it looks to kind of suit your army within the limits of that 6-inch across any direction. Impassable terrain is really powerful to be able to place it, and there's a big difference also between a 12-inch radius and a 6-inch radius is nothing. You can put this almost anywhere you want. As we'll get into later, it is a special feature. It can be controlled. It is worth victory points for being controlled. So you don't want to just necessarily put this in front of your opponent's army, but you can and just say, I know that you wanted to put your cannons on this hill. I'm afraid there's a Herdstone in the way, sir. Uh, this is something that's going to be a lot of figuring out and practicing with. To where is the placement is going to be different in different matchups, which I love that it's something that's going to be really flexible and skill intensive in how you make your Herdstone, and kind of just beyond that. This is a sweet hobby project. I'm actually glad they didn't make the model for it, which I can see why they didn't, because it had Sigmarite pieces in the Age of Sigmar version of it.
Sure.
I'm excited to make my Herdstone, little hobby project. Everybody's going to look different in the battlefield. It's very fun. I'm really excited for this.
Sure. So you said you were thinking about blocking cannons. I hadn't thought of it as a piece of terrain that blocks line of sight. It just says that it's impassable. Do you think it blocks line of sight?
I've asked the same question. I guess that my initial impression is there impassable terrain that does not block line of sight? That's kind of what I'm looking at this perspective from.
I think, unfortunately, it's probably not going to block line of sight, just purely because it doesn't say it does. So, like, when the trace detachment came out, I was like, oh, cool, they get a wood, because I was like, oh, it's a bit of natural terrain or whatever it's worded as. But then sort of as you read it back, you go, it actually doesn't say it's that. It's just a bit of terrain. So, like, it's giving you specifically the fact that it's impassable, but I don't think it blocks line of sight just on the basis of it doesn't say that it does.
I think it can be manipulated to the Beastman's player's advantage, whether it does or it doesn't. Because if you're playing shamans, it's something that you can put a shaman behind that they cannot move through, or even over if you block it with flying. They might not be able to get into your arc, but you can still shoot through. So you place it depending on the scenario. If you want to hem somebody in, if you want to have a bunker that you can fire over, or not fall back through to kind of. There's a lot of interesting things you could do it with. I'm not sure if it's more powerful if it does or doesn't block line of sight. Kind of depends on what armor you're playing.
Sure.
But it's something you're trying to control. So since you're playing around it, it might honestly be better if it doesn't block line of sight.
Yeah.
Or provide cover.
I think I'd like to see it sort of standardized for tournaments. So it just be like, this is what it does. Not that it's sort of like got the up in the air aspect to it, because I think that has potential for feels bad. And I think just having it sort of like this is the set out standard of what it does, and I've come to think the same of the Wood Elf Wood as well, just like being like, this is what it does. It's fairly immutable and it's not different table to table, so that when you're playing against a Beastman player, you don't have to debate them and be like, oh, but my last opponent said it does this, and oh, well, it doesn't actually. So I think it would be good to have it set in stone one way or the other. Pun 9.
It's the sort of rule that's niche enough on what is impassable terrain is kind of an esoteric question that you really have to dig through the book, and maybe there's not a super hard answer on it. Does it block line of sight inherently or not? And what does that mean? That if you haven't thought about this in advance, it's easy to get bowled over by somebody who's very confident about this in an event. I'd much rather have it be, I agree, set up in advance. This is how it's played. There's no confusion about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, we're kind of arguing academically, because WTC will 100% standardize it. I'm fairly certain. They were like, this is what it will do, this is what it will not do. So it's more just as a general point for those watching and wondering what it does. But special rules. First of all, the if you control a unit, you get magic resist 1, and that is not just the Beastman player, that is anyone controlling the unit. So controlling the whole Herdstone, sorry. So that's if you're the closest unit within 6 inches of it you control, and getting magic resist 1. It's nice, it's fine. Magic resist 1 doesn't normally move the needle on whether a spell goes off or not, but it's free, so I'm not upset at it.
Yeah, it's nice. And again, this is still sack with you're going to be controlling it. Yeah. So it's not just some random unit out there. You're likely to be able to get your +4 to spell or +5 on top of that magic resistance 1, which that does move the needle a little bit more, where it's suddenly favored on average you do to spell versus on average you don't.
That's true. That's very true. Bestial Fury. If the Herdstone is controlled by a Beastman unit, friendly Beastman Grey Herds units within 12 inches may reroll any rolls of 1 to wound in combat. That's pretty nice.
You just run through all these real quick. We can talk about them as a package. That might be easier.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Dark Sorcery. If it's controlled by a friendly Beastman unit, the wizards within 12 inches get +1 to cast. That's your allied wizards. Enemy wizards get -1 to cast. That, I think, is really strong. Fearsome Edifice is whilst within 12 inches of a Herdstone that's controlled by a Beastman unit. Enemy units get -1 to their leadership when making fear, panic, or terror tests. And then finally, if you control it at the end of the battle, you get 200 victory points, which is wild because that's a 300-point swing. If you have that in your list and you keep it safe, your opponent cannot score the 100 points that the Herdstone doesn't give up because it's not a destroyable unit, and you can score 200 points for having it. That's just 300 points that your opponent can't interact with if they don't get, if they don't control the feature.
Yeah, Points Denial Friendship ended with Doomseeker. Herdstone, my new best friend.
Fortunately, not something that can be allied into other armies.
Yes, thankfully. So, it's the package is what's so interesting to me, and it's got a big radius. Now, like you mentioned, +1 to cast enemy models. Enemy models have -1 to cast is good, but less important.
Sure.
Beastmen Wizards, not the unit controlling it, but if the Beastmen control it, the friendly wizard within 12 inches get +1 to cast is huge. +1 to cast. I mean, how many points do you pay for a Skull of Catan? 65 points.
Sure.
You don't see that in competitive play typically because you're only running usually one wizard in a Warriors of Chaos army. But Beastmen are often running sometimes as many as 5 wizards in a Beastman army. Giving them all +1 to cast, I would pay 100 points to give 5 wizards +1 to cast. Now, obviously, it's not that simple. They have to be close to the Herdstone. You have to control the Herdstone. It is conditional.
Yeah.
With that said, that's an ungodly powerful ability, and it lets you do things like, I can only take level 2 wizards in my Minotaur army. But they can cast a +3. That's suddenly a dramatic difference. They're much more likely to resolve spells.
What if you took this in the Wild Hunt and you had 5 wizards, as you mentioned, and you're in range of the other 4 wizards and the Herdstone? Suddenly your level 4s are casting out checks notes +9.
Yeah, we add a Jagged Dagger in there. Jagged Dagger, sacrifice, a guy +10.
Oh, that's a shame.
You can't take a Minotaur, but I'm trying to think of what unit you can join. I don't know if there's anything big you can join. You can sacrifice another Shaman for +2 though.
Ooh, or a Bray
I wouldn't recommend it,
+3.
but it's legal. It's a legal play. You're allowed to make it.
So if you sacrifice the other level 4, you can get +12 to your cast.
Yeah. Yeah, and since you're the controlling player, you decide you get to use him in your Cabal the Sorcerer for the plus, and then we'll sequence it so the Jagged Dagger goes off and I get to murder him.
Perfect.
Sudden but inevitable betrayal. Yeah, obviously very silly, but just it adds a lot. There's a lot of layers to that. The reroll 1s to wound is nice, and it's a nice little flavor thing because Beastmen are already rerolling 1s to hit most of the time off of Primal Fury. And 1s to wound might even be, in some situations, is better than 1s to hit, depending on what you're fighting with. So, with Minotaurs or things like that are often wounding on a 2 or a 3, rerolling, sometimes you'll get those combats. You charge in, you've got your big, hitty lord with an Ogre Blade or whatever. You get in, you make 5 attacks, only 3 hits, but that's fine. 1/1/6. Damn. Rerolls, I mean, you've reiterated this in many videos. Rerolls are really good. They give you consistency and just make the units better. And a 12-inch, again, units within 12 inches is a bigger radius than you think, because the unit has to be touching within 12. So this is a massive bubble, depending on where the Herdstone is. And if you place the Herdstone well, that's going to be every unit in most of the combats that matter during the game.
So with the fact that the Herdstone can be 6 inches across, that's a 30-inch bubble. That's pretty big.
And the thing is, we're initially thinking, okay, so that's great. My Minotaur's going to reroll the 1 great weapons. My Gore going to reroll the 1s. Impact hits, stomps.
True.
It's just, it doesn't matter what it is. Any wound you do in combat, you can reroll the 1s. It really layers up. Razor Gores are something a lot more reliable, things like that. It's just,
my Minotaur and a dragon is going to go crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a thing.
Oh man, I wish you could put a Minotaur on the back of some sort of flying mount. And I don't mean a dragon, but I mean sort of like, it would be like a Wyvern, where the Wyvern itself doesn't do much, but the Black Orc on top of it just absolutely slaps face. I'd like to see something similar. Like, let me ride a Preton with a Minotaur. That's fine.
Al and I were talking about this because we're both running a double Wyvern build.
Yeah.
We were discussing, there's just something about playing Beastmen that you're like, my Bray Horde my fighter longs for the skies. I've got to get this guy off of a chariot. Yeah. So we didn't get it in this book, but yeah. And the Fearsome Edifice, I think, is the least exciting part about this. The -1 leadership, because the enemy has to be within. It's only for fear, terror, and panic.
Well,
It's good,
I
and
think
we'll see some relevance to it later on.
I think you can build an entire leadership bomb list. I haven't written it, but there's enough stuff that sort of caught my eye, and I'm like, what if I never had to play against Undead or Bretonian Exiles with Veteran, and I only played against everyone else? That would make this leadership bomb army pretty cool.
What if you were, say, playing in a Teams event?
Well, yes, I guess that is true. I was more being silly because I was like, well, you're just going to see those armies. But yeah, potentially.
Right. It's less potent, I think, because just the radius is functionally smaller, because your opponents have to choose to come into it, and not every one of their units is going to care that much about Fear, Terror, Panic. Also, sometimes you don't want your opponent's units to panic, because it gives them a free reform.
Sure, but like in that list, you'd be putting that basically just outside of their deployment zone, and then you'd be full sending towards it and going, you don't control it yet? Oh, hey, it's turn 2. I have a big brick of whatever I've designated as my Herdstone holder. That's holding it now. Now I'm going to terror bomb you and really get the most out of it. But
yeah, if you place it more aggressively, that's interesting. Yeah. I think I'll still maintain that of the effects, I guess the magic resistance is pretty minor, because it's only the unit holding it, which is fair. If it was a 12-inch radius of magic resistance 1, that would be excessive.
Yeah.
But obviously the Dark Sorcerer is the selling point. Bestial Fury and Fearsome Edifice are both solid, but maybe a bit more situational, and you might want those in different armies.
Yeah,
but
situational build around is how I describe it. You have to work to make that worth.
Yes, 100%. But it could be worth. And again, this is 100 points. This is not that expensive.
Yeah.
Of a thing to have. Notably, you do have to control it. So if you put it in your opponent's deployment zone and they control or contest it or are close, then that means you don't get the benefits of it, which is important. One of the other things I was thinking about with the phrasing, so a Herdstone is your unit. You paid for it. It is yours.
Sure. No.
It's controlled by a Beastman Herds unit.
It's not a unit.
Enemy units.
It's a bit of terrain.
No. I'm not saying it control itself.
Okay,
I'm saying that rules as written, if you're playing a mirror match, if your opponent controls the Herdstone,
yep.
It affects it.
It gives them all the buffs.
It gives no. Well, there's two. I think that's how it should work.
Yeah.
That's just not how it's technically phrased. It's because it's your unit. The Herdstone is your unit. It affects enemy models with the penalties. You see what I'm saying? It's controlled technically. This is a very silly argument, and not how you should play it at all. If you both are fighting over a Herdstone,
we're going to get into discussing English syntax. And given that I live on the right side of the pond, I claim victory, despite the fact that I might not be right. I'm just going to go with we wrote the language, so therefore anything I say is correct. But I think, and just to not be silly for a second, I think the way that it's written, if it's controlled by a Beastman unit, friendly Beastman units that are within range.
Yes,
so
that's absolutely the correct way to interpret that, FAQ or not. It would be very silly to interpret it otherwise.
Yeah.
I just had that funny thought. But honestly, it is something, if you're playing a Beastman matchup, you want to be a lot more careful with the placement of this, because it's not only do you lose the advantage of it, you're paying 100 points to give your opponent +1 to their casting and such.
So I could actually see it going either way, and I don't really care which way it goes. But again, it's just something I'd like to see FAQ'd to be clear one way or the other. And I'd hope that tournaments generally pick that up and go one way with it to get a nice, consistent...
Yes, and this is one I can see a little bit of sarcasm in the response from GW. Not unwarranted.
I do like
given the absolute nonsense that I just said. So.
Yeah, but if they wrote their rules less sloppily, then we wouldn't ask silly questions. But anyway, one last point before we move on. I just want to point out, on the Fearsome Edifice, you can control the Herdstone with the unit that's causing the terror check, because you test before you move away. So you can have a Preton, or more realistically, like a Shaggoth, stood about to charge. Wait, does a Shaggoth cause terror? I feel like it actually only causes
Yes, they do.
Okay, great. So you can have the Herdstone within 12 inches of your opponent, have the Shaggoth controlling it, declare the charge, they take the test at -1, and then you run off and charge after them. Whether that's going to come up a lot, maybe not, but it's just a nice little interaction there.
No, it is nice for things like, people are going to want to contest your Herdstone to stop you getting these benefits. And this is more of a defensive element of that, is, sure, you can run your little unit of skirmish cap up into range, but they're going to panic away from it very easily because of the penalties, and then they're no longer contesting, and I get my stuff back.
I hadn't even thought of it in that regard. Yeah, that's cool. All right, well, let's move on to the special characters, because I think we've talked about the Herdstone enough, and both the special characters are kind of neat. So starting off with Kralmor, the Prophet of Ruin. Kralmor's tanky. T5, as standard, a 4th wound, which is nice for Bray Shaman. Otherwise, pretty much the same across the board, I think. Regular infantry on a 30 mil, so you can't sit inside a unit of Gore the same way that you can do with the Bray Shamans with their changeable base size. But you're a level 4 wizard, you know laws, either dark or primal magic, and then you've got a whole host of rules, basically breaking down to, you've got a 4 ward save, you reduce enemy units' leadership by 1, so again, if you're going for terror causing or like leadership shenanigans, that's really nice. And then also, you've got a little token that you can place anywhere on the battlefield that's out of 8 inches of enemy unit range. It doesn't, you can't kill it, I believe. It's just if
no, you can't
Kralmor
interact with it
dies.
at all.
Yeah, so you just keep your wizard safe, which you try to do anyway. Every turn, it gets to cast Devolve at level 3, which is basically a Banshee Scream if it was balanced.
Yes, there's no Devolve is a 15-inch range. Enemy takes a leadership test. For every point they fail by, they lose a wound.
Yeah.
Notable, unlike a Banshee Scream, you do not get a ward save against this. You just lose the wounds.
Ooh. I take it back. It's not more balanced. It's broken in a different way.
I believe it's also an 8 to cast. I think it's the same as Vile Tide, so it'll go off very reliable.
Yeah. This is interesting. I think it basically comes down to, do I want a primal magic caster in my army? If yes, Kralmor, pretty cool. I don't feel like dark magic really ticks all the boxes that I want for Beastmen, unfortunately.
No, they don't have enough stuff that can guarantee the charge. Those like knight units that can just really hit hard with the frenzy and the hatred. It's harder for them to guarantee that. So that's where the dark magic really shines. Or moving around those really big, expensive characters. Beastmen mostly want their units anyway, so teleporting a solo character, not that exciting. But it's a way to get primal magic without paying for it or having anything fancy to do on a guy. He's just efficiently statted. He's nothing. He doesn't do anything super crazy. The devolve thing is cute, but mostly it's. I think it's more going to be something. It's going to be at its best, much like harpies, when people are more nervous of it than they should be. But it's there. It's going to cast every turn, and sometimes it'll do some damage. And it's kind of free because a Bray Shaman level 4 is 180 base. You're paying 65 for these upgrades.
Yeah.
Start off, a 4+ ward save is great, and you cannot get it in the Beastman army other than taking the 75 point magic armor, which a Shaman normally can't. So, 4+ ward save and a 4th wound, that might be worth. That's close to the 5 points value already. You do lose out on not being able to have him on a 25 mil. Not a huge deal, but it is a downside.
Yeah. I think if you're
he's
going
just solid.
for that Terror Bomb army that I was sort of vaguely alluding to, he fits in really well because he is basically double Devolve because he also has Lore of Beasts, so he can also cast Devolve. So if you're really trying to hit their leadership characteristic, you can just be like, cool, we've got you down to a lower leadership. I'm going to devolve you. Didn't matter, didn't work. All right, let me devolve you again. You're going to fail one of them probably. So I think that's an angle that you can go down with them.
Yeah, and there are matchups where maybe Devolve is going to be you're going to really struggle to use it well because you don't have Necromancy or any of the lores that like really nuke somebody's leadership. So maybe if you're playing against something like Bretonian Exiles, they've got a veteran everywhere at the rerolls. The thing is, you don't have to take Devolve. Obviously, on the Leering Spirit comes with it, but you can choose between Devolve and Vile Tide. Even if you build towards one, you have the option of the other, which is fantastic. It's nice to have that flexibility. He's kind of solid all around. The only thing you're missing out on is he's not weapon skill 5, which is kind of nice to have on a Shaman, but he's blind, so I mean, I think I would trade weapon skill 3, going 5, going to a 3 in exchange for a ward save. I think we make that deal every day.
And the 4th wound, I'll take that trade deal every day of the week.
He's remarkably. I mean, this is a wizard. He's not wearing armor, and he is harder to kill than a lot of characters.
That is true. Let's go straight to the lore of primal magic then. I think that makes sense. So, starting off with the signature spell, because this is another one that you can pick up on Kralmor. The signature spell is Primordial Gloom. It's a vortex cast on a 9. It's a 12-inch range, remains in play. When in play, the template does not move already a good start. Is treated as dangerous terrain. Whilst within 6 inches, enemy units suffer a -1 modifier to their leadership characteristic to a minimum of 2, and treat open ground as difficult terrain. When is this good? A, if you're trying to do leadership shenanigans, we've got it as a signature spell, great. B, you're playing against fanatic spam.
Fanatics, eat shit, fanatics.
Yeah.
It's too dark and you're bumping into walls and dying. Fantastic.
Yeah, things go bump in the night and it's you against your mate. Sucks to suck, buddy. You've just died immediately after coming out. So I'm a huge fan of that. I really like having that flexibility. But, the other lore that has it, high magic, I don't typically run into. So, this is a lore that people might actually run. Sometimes you're going to play against night goblins. Sometimes the night goblin player is going to be real sad.
Yeah, this is great as a signature specifically, because if you're running a leadership bomb shenanigans, you might build around this.
Sure.
Otherwise, you might have primal magic because there's some good spells in there. And this is just a nice option. Beastmen already have some really good options.
Yeah.
For their signature spells, with Wild Tide being the main one. But just having access in a spot where you think it'll be helpful, it's just nice. It's kind of just, it's there, you don't need it, but if you want it, it can be very good in some situations, and that's a great signature spell option to have.
Yeah, even just turning, open ground into difficult terrain in a 14-inch bubble, that's great. Your opponent's really keen on chariots. I'm sorry, buddy. Not only are you getting to me even more slowly than you were before, I hope you don't roll a 1 because you're a chariot and you're on difficult terrain. That would suck for you. You might take D3 wounds. So I just feel like this is one of those like sort of skill check spells, because this is going to be worth taking. If you don't build around it, this is going to be worth taking like 5 or 10% of the time, and identifying those games and going, actually, this is going to up my win, like my chance to win by like a good 5-10%, because it's something that my opponent can't play around. I really like those sorts of spells.
I agree. Now, unlike the necromancy spell, it is not. You can still use your general's leadership, but it'll have the -1 if you do it. I think -1 leadership is underrated as an effect too, because you forget how many leadership tests you make in a game of Old World. You're trying to reform. You're trying to rally after you fell back from a charge. There's a lot of little things like that can be really frustrating to suddenly go from a lot of armies. You play Orc and Goblin. They're a 9. A Chaos Lord is a 9. Going from a 9 to an 8 is a massive drop.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan. Obviously, I play a dragon a lot, and I get to say, make me a leadership test at -1 for Terror, and then now, theoretically, I'm running a Shaggoth, and I can go make me a leadership test at -2 for Terror and Spell. And if you get it up to -2, -3, whatever, reducing leadership is way stronger than just making them test at an additional 1 point of combat res. So big fan of that.
Yeah, and Terror is one of those things where it's in some matchups it's pass this test or lose the game immediately, and being able to say this is a -1 here, you move within range of the Herdstone, so it's a -2, that becomes terrifying in every sense to some armies saying, oh, I can't afford to run away here, I can't shoot, I can't, not to mention the fact that you can say, all right, you failed the Terror test, I know you're fleeing immediately, so now I'll charge you with something that's fast and flying, like Harpies, and run you down. There's a lot of spots where this can make somebody really trepidatious about how they approach the auras. They have to play around it. It hinders their movement and kind of how they have to play the game, and kind of gets in their head, which I love, which also is spot on flavor. Primordial Gloom, you're out here in the spooky forest, something's wrong, the ground's all mussed up, there's bugs everywhere. Great.
Perfect. Moving on, Call of the Wild, #1 spell, cast on an 8, range 12, only targets infantry or cavalry. Good job, that is most of the available units. Until the end of this turn, target friendly unit gains reserve move. If I'm running, a unit of Chaos Spawn, I'm probably going to try giving them reserve move. I think that fixes a lot of their issues. Obviously, you can't reserve move into combat, but just actually getting up the board a little bit faster, I think, is an interesting proposition.
About that with Spawn, but that's actually really funny. It's literally just double movement for them. It's very free.
Yeah. So I think that's and because I believe they're also open order, so they will get their random move, then they get a pivot, then they get a random move, then they get a pivot.
Yeah, they get to pretend they're Tomb Kings.
Oh god, yeah.
Reserve move, I think in general is less exciting on Beastmen compared to the one that Wood Elves get. They're much happier to have it. They tend to run more cavalry, which can make better use of it. More skirmishers. The skirmishing units for Beastmen tend to be chaff, random 5 Gores, things like that.
Yeah.
But with that said, this is really good, in particular with the short range magic of Beastmen, where if you put yourself into range to cast Vile Tide, you're often at risk of being charged back, and being able to walk up within 15 inches, hit them with the bees, and then walk back so you're now 20 inches away. 22 if you walk up, Vile Tide, Wind Blast, walk back. There's some synergies with this that can be really powerful. Beyond just getting units up the board, this is great with the Ungor Poison unit.
Sure.
You can travel Mystical Pathway, shoot, and then reserve moves. So you can really move around with it a lot.
Most importantly, change your facing or reform the number of ranks. That's really powerful on a shooting unit like that.
100%. Yeah, you get the open order pivot. A lot of Beastmen units are open order, so you get to pivot more frequently. Get you a lot of flex in the movement and lets you do things. And Beastmen are an army that's really starved for mobility options, so this is very welcome.
Sure. In the Gloaming Wildwood, Hex, cast on a 10, 15-inch range. It's a remains in play, which I don't love, but you're mostly getting the effect on your turn, so it's not the end of the world. While this spell is in play, the unit that you have cast it on suddenly fears all of your units. The way that it's worded is a little confusing, but basically, I cast it on my enemy's unit. That unit fears everything that I have. If the unit that I had already caused fear, it upgrades that fear to terror. So it's like the necromancy spell that makes your unit cause fear. Instead, you're just putting it on a single enemy unit, which is fine. You can potentially cause multiple terror tests, I guess. If you have multiple fear causes, you can be like, oh, I really want that unit to run away. Let's hit it with this. Then I'm going to charge it with 3 fear causes. You're probably not passing all of those leadership tests. I'll have a fully, please.
Yeah, and fear is normally pretty middling in
Sure.
Old World. There's not a lot that really gets big value out of it, but suddenly, I mean, think about this with Dragon Ogre Shartax. You've got a couple of Shartax and somebody. You hit them within the Gloaming Wildwood. Now, both of those 70-point single models cost terror. Maybe at -1, maybe at -2. I mean, you've got the other spells in this lore, and the stuff we talked about earlier. Multiple terror checks off of 70-point models is crazy. The other thing this does is, I believe, if I'm understanding this right, if I don't cause fear and I cast this on your dragon, right? Your dragon now fears my Ungor block, which means that you do not cause terror against my block.
Yes.
That can be really important too. So there's no -1 when I'm trying to run away. There's no test to lose the game, as we mentioned before. It's got a decent range for a hex. It is a high casting value. I think this is a really interesting one because in some matchups, this will have a lot of applications. In some if you're playing against undead, this only negates their fear or terror, it's rarely dead.
Yeah, that's the army where fear actually matters. Like, they've got a big unit of skeletons, and suddenly you've failed a leadership test accidentally, and now I'm -1 to hit them. That sucks. I was going to struggle to crunch through 40 skeletons or zombies anyway, so, like, hate that for me. So getting rid of that aspect of it is really nice.
Yeah, I agree. It's not going to be amazing in every matchup, but you'll always have a use for it, which is nice as a floor for a spell. You're never super upset to roll this. There are some spells in other lores that, sure, maybe I'll try to roll dice setup. It's not going to do anything. You know, some of the illusion spells that are just, I can make you take stupidity from 9 inches away. This isn't anything like that. Yeah. It's not always going to be amazing, but you can build around it. The only real challenge, a 10+ to cast is going to be tough if you roll on a lower level caster. Although, I don't know, maybe having a +3 or a +7, depending on what you've got. So, I don't know.
This feels to me like a higher skill cap spell, so I'm excited to get absolutely wrecked by it, but in a situation that I don't expect, and then be like, oh, I'm never going to fall for that again.
I think there's more to get out of this spell than we're first seeing, too. Maybe not a ton more, but it's got applications that aren't obvious.
Moving on very quickly to a spell that doesn't have more to the eye than we think, and is possibly the worst spell printed ever, and yes, I'm including Flaming Sword. Flock of Doom. It's an assailment, you cast it on an 8, it's a 3-inch blast template in the center of the enemy unit, and you scatter D3+1. And it's strength 3, AP 0, multiple hits 2. This is bad. It's an assailment on a model that might not want to be in combat. You're not super bothered because you can build tanky wizards, but your range damage is supreme. So, okay, first of all, not great. Then the actual damage it does is terrible. Strength 3, multiple wounds 2. This doesn't even kill monstrous infantry well. You're wounding on 5s. Then it scatters, and then you have a risk of being hit. So if it doesn't scatter, and by the way, D3+1, who came up with that? That's so unfair that you... Like, what do they think we're running? Royal Host? we're not running Royal Host. We're running dragons. We're running Bretonians. We're running big bricks of poison archers. But outside of the poison archers, this doesn't have a good target, and I hate it for that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's against the units it's best against, it's still very bad. And like you said, probably worse than like Flaming Sword, which is notoriously a spell that I don't think I've ever cast because it's the worst spell in Elementalism. I'll drop it to anything else. I drop it for above of any other spell. There's no application. This is not only bad, it's a weird mishmash. It steals its name from a Wood Elf signature spell for some reason. They're both called Flock of Doom, but do different things.
And they're both bad.
They're both bad, and yet this one is worse. It's remarkably
bad. They do the same thing, but one is at range and one is in melee. And I think there's some other minor differences, but I think they're very similar spells. But they're both crap, so let's move on. Fury of the Beast. It's an enchantment that casts on 9. Until the end of the turn, the caster and any unit they have joined gains the Fight in Extra Rank special rule. It's a self-range enchantment, so you can cast it even if you're locked up in combat. This is interesting, and I don't know how I feel about that, because it's only one attack, because it's a supporting attack. I don't know what I'd put this on.
I think it's a shame that they made it only for one turn, when it's such a medium effect. How many attacks are you getting out of this? It doesn't compare well to any other self-buff spells. You can't even cast it. I don't know if I like it better or worse with being ranged self. You can cast it while you're in combat.
Sure.
But the big thing is Fight in Extra Rank is good on things with like great weapons with heavy attack where you can really leverage that extra. And Bestigor are quite bad and not typically played. And if you did run Bestigor, would you run a Shaman with them? That's so much investment into them. Yeah. So if you're not running it on something with great weapons, because that's the only great weapon infantry in the list. It's not bad on Gore, but they don't get their extra attack in second rank.
Yeah.
It's okay in the poison archer brick as a way to just get some extra damage out of it. It's not useless, but it's less useful than I'd like it to be.
It compares very poorly to the enchantment cast on a 9 range self spell that's in the number 4 slot in Demonology. It might actually cast on a 10. If it does, I'm very sad. But
yeah, I think it does, but still.
Demonic Vessel / Vigor, whichever one it is, both start with a V, giving you plus strength, attack, and AP. This effectively gives each model in the front rank +1 attack, no extra buffs. Obviously, that's not quite a one-to-one comparison, because if you charge but somehow strike last, so you lose attacks from the front rank, it has issues there. So it's probably, if you're a lower initiative, maybe it's better than the Demonology spell, but I just like the Demonology lore better, because you've also got a plus toughness spell.
It's much better. It's a shame other armies would like this more. This is, I think, especially bad in Beastmen in particular, which is odd.
Yeah, that's true. I'd love this on Cavalry, I think. Someone who can reliably bring it to bear.
Lances, this would be sick on, and anybody with big single, high strength, high AP, single attacks could really get a lot of leverage out of this, and that's not what Beastmen have at all. So it's got some interesting application if you're running them, I think, in the poison block, but I don't know that I'd be excited to take this anywhere else, and I'm not especially excited to take it there.
Yeah, give it to me in Beastmen. Not Beastmen, Empire. Give it to me in Empire. Number 5, Strangle Root. It's a magic missile that casts on a 9. It's only range 46, and it's a straight line 46 in length. From your base edge, any enemy model whose base falls under this line suffers D3 strength 3 hits at AP 2. So this is slow, and this is short range. However, into some targets, this is going to be pretty brutal, I think.
This works very well with the Hag Tree Fetish as well.
Yeah, but I mean...
So it's low strength AP attack. You can get it alongside of... It's situational, right?
Yeah.
So 4d6 is on average 14 inches. So not, on average...
Yeah.
Similar to Vile Tide, Wind Blast, your other short Beastman magic. I guess I have other questions. Is it like a cannon where you can only hit one model rank?
No.
Or are you not limited on one model? Right. So then that means you could potentially be hitting 2 models per rank. So
well, the line is 1 pixel or like.
That's right. So I guess not 2, but
you can overlap at a point, but you're not getting more than 1 model per rank for most of the units.
Yeah. So maybe better against skirmishers. It's not. I don't know. I want to like this spell.
Yeah.
It's a magic missile which Beastman could use more of. It's got a decent stat line, D3 strength 3 hits. I guess the question is, how many hits do you need, or how many D3 to make this good? And that's kind of what you're looking at. How many does it make it a solid magic missile? If we assume 14-inch range,
Sure.
which sometimes it'll be higher, sometimes it'll be lower. It's nice to have the option of throwing 22 inches away from somebody, kind of like a giant spawn. It makes people nervous. Love that. I mean, if it's 3D3 strength 3 hits, is that good? 4D3 is kind of where it starts getting like that's eight strength 3 hits at AP2. I feel like that's a pretty solid magic missile, right?
Yeah. Obviously, you can't overkill, so each model has to take their hits separately. It's not like you just go, oh,
how it works.
Yeah. But I still think that's fine. Like the when this is good, like you're down the line of a unit of Dwarf Rangers or Graveguard, something that goes a little bit wider. I think that's really interesting. You can potentially kill, 10, 12 skeletons in a Royal Host list where they've got 140 in one unit, and then they'll heal them all back immediately. So there are some places it's good.
It's also not awful against something like, cavalry, lance formation. This is really nice.
That's true,
they're all lined up for you. Even Peg Knights. Again, you hit 3 or 4 Peg Knights with this. That's meaningful damage. You're not worried about the overkill. Bretonnia is where I think this can really potentially shine.
Yeah, I mean, with Hagtree Fetish, this kills Peg Knights at a rate they're not comfortable with, I think. Because
you drop this and then Vile Tide on the same guy, that's disgusting.
You're wounding on 5s, but re-rolling, which means that you make 55% of the wound rolls you take. So if you hit, each model is taking theoretically 1 wound on average with the Hagtree Fetish. It's AP2, gets them down to only a 5-up save, and it's a low strength, so it keeps them at a 6-up ward. I can see some play there. But, yeah, an interesting one to play around with. Then we've got the most interesting spell, in my opinion, Neath the Shade and Woad Span. It's a vortex that casts at a 10. It's a 15-inch range remains in play. It's a large blast template. It does not move. It is dangerous terrain, which blocks line of sight. So already we're thinking Column of Crystal. Obviously, you can actually charge over this one, but if you're blocking line of sight to, say, a dragon, you can't charge what you can't see. Within 6 inches of the template, enemy units suffer a -2 modifier to their ballistic skill to a minimum of 1. Enemy units that end its movement within 3 immediately make a panic test. If failed, they then flee away from the nearest enemy unit that is not itself fleeing. So, Arrows of Asp, eat your art out, because you're not hitting on 5s anymore. This is the only thing in the game, well, it's one of the few things that interacts with ballistic skill directly, and it does it in a bubble. So if you can drop this in the middle of your opponent's gun line, they are sad.
This is the reason to take this lore. This is, I think, my favorite spell in the lore. There's some interesting ones in the lore. There's a couple of medium ones. This spell does a lot of different things, and they're all pretty powerful. I mean, just starting off with a 5-inch blast that's dangerous. Within 15 inches is a really solid range on vortexes. Doesn't move, which is what you want with this kind of effect. No line of sight can be drawn. Would that be the same as the woodland boundaries, where you can see if you're in it, or does that mean you can't see through any part of it?
I think
the phrasing on that is a little bit.
I think it's just you can't see through it at all, I believe, is the intent there.
Right, so if you're partially in it, you're still blind in front of it? Is that what you mean, or? That's what I'm saying. And the phrasing is different because they say you can't. I have to check the phrasing on woods. My first assumption would be that it's similar to a wood. It's called Neath the Shade and Woad Span, right?
Yeah.
So it's functionally a wood, but the ballistic skill penalty is going to affect some armies. The panic tests are going to affect some armies, but just the core effect of placing a large blast template that you can't see through and doesn't move, and it just sits there and blocks line of sight, that's really good.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is a really good spell. And it pairs really well with Call of the Wild, because you can walk up, cast your spell, and reserve move backwards. Suddenly, you're not within range to be, dispelled easily. And it's one of those magical 10+ vortexes, so you need to roll an 11 on a fated dispel. Good luck getting rid of that. If you've played against Column of Crystal, you know that's miserable. So, really strong, I think.
Yeah, strategic placement of this can make... that's not even talking about the ballistic skill penalty. If you walk up... That's the other thing. So I place this in front of your archer, right? You can't see me now.
Yep.
If you can walk into it, but if you're walking into it, then you're at -2 ballistic skills. You're probably not doing anything anyway.
Yep.
This is really strong.
-1 for move, -2 for ballistic skill, -2 for stacking the double, minus to shoot on my Death Star, suddenly you
Right,
could potentially be like -5 to hit, which is ludicrous but very funny.
and do you want to walk into it when there's Beastman behind it?
No.
And if I decide I want to charge you, I can just drop it and then charge you. I have full control over it. There's a lot to like about this spell.
Okay, so back to characters. We've got Gorus Warho, who is a move 8 Centaur, which is not a great start. Strength 5, toughness 4, 3 wounds, 4 attack. So basically just a Centaur chieftain, I think, stat-wise. I don't...
The only thing is he's leadership 8. That's the only thing he gets above them. Otherwise, identical stat line.
Sure, okay. Has Drunken, which is a real shame. Has Father of Beasts, which allows friendly Centaur herds to re-roll the d6 on the Drunken table. Doesn't affect himself. So
or other chieftains.
Or other chieftains. I guess if you've got him in the unit of Centaur herd, it would count because you just roll once for the unit, I assume.
Yes, that's correct, but there's a problem with that. They're really nice because you can run them in skirmish. Centaur are light cavalry. Goros, for some reason, they made him a heavy cavalry. He cannot join a Centaur herd when they're in skirmish, which I think is I don't know why, or if that was intentional, but it really limits how he's used. Because you want to have him with them, but now granted they are you get your fast cavalry pivot. I think does he have that?
No, because
I don't even know if Centaur have that or not. He's not. Yeah, he's just not like.
He's not open order. He hasn't. If he joins the
unit, he'll assume there. Yeah,
he'll get there
otherwise.
Yeah. Cool. So that's disappointing. Sons of Goros is interesting. 0 to 1 Centaur herd in the same list may be upgraded to Sons of Goros for +2 points a model, +1 to weapon skill and leadership, and gain armor bane 1. I don't necessarily want to take Centaur to upgrade, but if I am, I'd probably pay 2 points for that many rules. That feels like a pretty good rate.
I agree. I think so Centaur aren't a competitive unit, but they're a fun unit. If you want to run them, I am glad that there is a way to kind of do a more flavorful thing with them. It's an option that you're not really losing anything for in the wild herd. So you could definitely do a Centaur themed army, have fun with it, have the Sons of Goros, reroll your drunken checks. It's also very flavorful that just because you want to impress your drunken father, that does not make said drunken father any less drunk himself. So I think they really nailed that.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Drunken Father, he does hand out beatings. He's got the Man Smasher, which is a Strength +1, AP -1, Armor Bane 1, multiple wounds D3. So it's a budget Ogre Blade. And honestly, at 155 points, to have a budget Ogre Blade, I don't hate that. Because you can run really good upgraded characters, but they get pretty pricey. So just sneaking in a cheeky 155 point character that is hard to screen, admittedly, because you don't really have much in the way of cavalry. But it does give you, a Strength 6, AP -1, Armor Bane 1 Ogre Blade, effectively.
Yeah, he loses the +1 strength when he's not charging.
True.
But it's a good weapon, honestly. Pretty decent. He also has a 6+ ward that's a 5+ ward against wounds caused by a magical attack, which is fun.
I like that.
I like that.
It's normally the other way around, so just seeing him better against magic is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, again, hits the flavor. He's pretty cheap. I could see a world that someone takes him. I'm not going to be, but yeah, he's
one thing that hurts him for me is he has no armor. He's not even light armor. What's that?
Of course not. He's a Centaur.
No, that's true. But the characters can take heavy armor and a shield. So
that's true. That's true.
So he hits hard. He's not that expensive. Leadership 8, honestly, for Beastman, that's as good as it gets. He's got D3 stomps. He moves through cover, so it's all the Centaur stuff. You can still roll an Eye of the Gods. He's honestly better than I thought he would be too. If you want to run a Centaur list, he's a great way to do it. He's pretty reasonable for being an ancient, drunken, whatever he is. But I don't dislike him. I don't think he's competitively playable, but he's got a lot to love.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Let's move on and go through the units. There are a couple of interesting ones and then a couple of just sort of like slight tweaks. So Warped Gore's one of the interesting ones, but they do come in at a 16 pointer model premium, which is pretty expensive. And this is your Forsaken but Gore. So you come in units of 5, they're on a 30 mil base, they have the random attacks, they've got decent weapon skill 4, they're still toughness 4. They're Gores, which mean they get still, +1 strength on the charge, or am I making that up? Nope.
They don't actually have that, unfortunately.
No, I've made that up. Okay.
They have Blood Rage, Primal Fury, but not that. They do move through cover. They have Armored Hide 1.
Yeah.
Stubborn,
And you
Warband.
can
They have a lot of the good Beastman rules. The Strength 3 hurts them a lot, though.
you can give them shields for free, so you can get them to a 5 up armor save, but they don't have a ward save, or you can just take an additional hand weapon, which is probably the way to go. Weirdly, you can give them command, and also they don't have loner, which means that you can join them. So you can put a wizard in there, or just a character if you want to. As you say, lots of good rules. Blood range for Frenzy if you roll a double 1 on your Primal Fury. Random attacks D3.
It's any double.
Sorry, yes.
And any double where you pass, yeah.
That's correct. Stubborn as well, and then they've got the Blessings of Chaos table that Forsaken have, so you can get either poisoned attacks, AP2, or +1 to your toughness. Actually, that's different.
That's the only one that's swapped out. You don't get the Killing Blow, which I think I prefer the Killing Blow most of the time. Although it's not strictly worse. Sometimes toughness 5 is no joke. So
I wish you could pick, like, just pick one at the start of the battle and you have it all game. That'd be cool. But you know what?
yeah,
It's fine. I think these are too pricey for me. I'd pay for the 9 or 10 points for this, I think.
yeah, they're fun. They've got some interesting things. Part of the problem is they're with Strength 3. They're an infantry killer, and Beastman has no shortage of infantry killers. They're not faster than anything else. They can buy, they're maybe interesting as an ambusher, but ultimately they're just very fragile for 60 models.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on, we've got Primal War Hounds, which are War Hounds, but with slightly more rules. So instead of having open order, they have close order, which, despite being the name of the channel, I'm not in favour of. They're way better with open order. But you can use them as like a ranked up unit, again, if you want something to kill light infantry, which there is no shortage of in this list. So you can take Ungol Ravagers for every 3 Primal War Hounds. They're 6 points a model. It's a 7-point character. The Ungol Ravager has a throwing spear, so it gets fight and extra rank on the charge. So you can get like a decent density of attacks on the charge, which is cool. And you can you even take these in the Blood Herd detachment? If you can give them frenzy? I don't think you can you? It's just normal Warhounds. Yeah. I mean, they're fine. I think I'm just taking normal Warhounds, though.
Yeah, so they do have some advantages. Close order, they get the ranks. They're pretty fast. They have the Ravager in there means they can use the General's leadership, which is a big deal.
Sure.
They have warbands. They're rerolling their charges and getting extra leadership on top of that, which is nice. The big problem is that Warhounds don't do anything in combat because they're just trying to be tough to 3-1 attack each. So that's really where they struggle. They're great for chaff, but these are chaff where you have to pay it by at least 11 models, 10 Warhounds and the Ravager, just at a minimum. They may be interesting as a combat res, like you charge in with a unit and you hit with these as well to get close order and a rank.
Mm-hmm.
They're not that expensive to do that. That seems a little bit thin, but again, they are the primal,
Honestly,
or the wild herd.
The fact that they're 6 points a model for a Swift Stride Horde unit, that's not awful. Take up a lot of space. They do have to come in a 10+ unit, which I hate immediately looking at that. That's rough. But yeah, this is one of those that maybe there's something that we'll see them on the table for. Maybe there's a reason to do so.
I don't think this is an inherently bad unit. They're still Warhounds fundamentally, and they have advantages over Warhounds. The downside is you have to take them in 10s basically. Sure. And open order is nice, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal in the Warhound. It is nice to have.
Yeah, realistically, 67 points minimum because you're going to take at least one Ungol Ravager, so you get the benefit of the leadership and the using the General's leadership as well. Cool. Primal War Herds. Now, this is an interesting one, but it doesn't have... if you could take bows on the Ungol, I think it'd be good, but you can't. So,
I agree.
This is a unit of infantry that is a 20 minimum, so this is already... You're locked into big pie plate units. And it's 10+ Gore and 10+ Ungor, and it's a mixed Motley Crew unit, and you've got basically all of the rules you'd expect, but only applying to the parts of the unit you'd expect. So all of the Gore get +1 to strength on the charge. I think it would have been fine just to give both of the, give the Gore and the Ungor bestial charge, and have that be a reason to run them together. The Ungor are buoyed along by the enthusiasm and under the watchful eye of the Gore, who are, bigger and stronger than them. I'm not sure what they bring.
Yeah, the really important... So they are close order, which normally Beastmen infantry do not get close order. The Motley Crew is... And they have a weird version of Motley Crew with the unit, which, I don't know. I feel like that could cause some math problems with figuring it out, because normally Motley Crew units don't have mixed toughness, and I'd have to look at the Motley Crew rules to figure that out. Sure. The big thing that kills them for me is they are impetuous for some reason.
Oh, yeah.
If they weren't impetuous, I'd be like, huh, that's
Mm.
kind of interesting. I wish they could take bows so that I could make my royal host but hairier.
Yeah.
I understand why they didn't it because they don't want me to any more royal hosts running around. It's probably for healthy for
True.
the game. Um, it's an interesting unit. If it didn't have impetuous, I'd be like, huh, this is one of the downsides for me for the wild heart because you have to take one of these. And again, impetuous can be really rough. You're paying a lot of points just for the basics of this, which again, you're trying to hit that 33% core. So it's not bad. You can make them ambush, but you're paying 20 points to do that.
Mm.
I don't know. They're interesting. I think they have some play. I just wish they weren't impetuous. That's really all it comes down to.
Yeah. 50-point magic banner and 25 points magic item on the unit champion. Is that better than what Gores can take?
That's standard for Gore. They
Oh,
can
okay.
already do that.
Well, in that case, yeah, I'm struggling to see it, but that's okay because they exist, and if you want to do a mixed unit, then you
Yeah, they're a fun callback to the previous way of doing it, so that's nice.
sure. And
Was
then
it seventh edition?
we have the Preton, and the Preton, first off the bat, has a weird base. It's wider than it is long, and that's always funny to me. And I don't know why, but it's 75 mil by 50 mil, so you get a wider frontage to be hit back on, which I don't love, but it is what it is. It's a flying creature, so it's got fly 10, movement 6 for all of those, Bretonians or Beastmen that you play against turning off fly. Strength and toughness 5, 4 wounds, 4 attacks. The attacks are pretty decent. Strength 5, AP 2, armor bane 1 is just the best version of Wicked Claws that we've seen on a mid-tier beast. You've got impact hits have AP 1 and armor bane 1, and you get D3 impact hits, which is pretty nice. If you win combat and you choose to restrain, enemy units within 6 must pass a panic test as if a nearby friend had been destroyed. So again, this is another lever that we can pull if we're going down the try to do the psychology bomb list. But yeah, and they come with heavy armor but no regen. I think if this had a 5-up regen, I'm suddenly very excited to play it. Since it doesn't.
Or maybe if it wasn't a large target, because it's not that big.
Sure.
It's fairly fragile, but it's hard to hide it. The other thing that's notable about this is it does not have Swift Stride. It joins the special club, along with the Bloodthirster and the Demon Prince, of flyers that don't have Swift Stride, and that's a huge hit against it. Because when you have Fly 10 and Swift Stride, the large target becomes a big advantage because you can threaten characters in the back line. There's skirmish. You can do weird wraparounds. Without the Swift Stride, suddenly your max charge range with this thing is 16 inches. That's a big difference from 19.
Yeah, I just inserted Swift Stride in my head. I was like, of course it has Swift Stride. Why not?
Yeah, the other thing that's funny with this is you'll note it has claws and fangs, counts as hand weapon, and twisted antlers. I wonder if the intent was to make the twisted antlers usable only on the charge. That's not how it's put. You could just use them as much as you want. So they have a hand weapon that they will never use because the antlers are great.
That is
so. It's interesting. 160 is a lot to pay for some of the limitations it has.
Yeah.
I don't hate the package. It's something that Beastmen don't have before, so there's reasons to run a Preton. They're in specials, which is pretty, accessible. You can run, I think, go to 1 per 1,000 in whatever list you want. Maybe not the minimum, but the other two.
Yeah. It's good weapon skill for a monster as well. Weapon skill.
It is high weapon skill. It does a lot of damage on the charge. It's going to hit pretty reliably. It's initiative 5. It's quite quick as well. Four attacks with the armor penetration and then the antlers. It's something where if it were cheaper, I would love it for clearing out threatening like knights and things like that. With that high damage on the charge and high weapon skill, hit on 3s, wound on 3s or 2s. That's really scary. It can do that sort of thing well. It's just quite fragile because it's only 4 wounds with heavy armor. 5. It can die in a couple of fireballs. So you have to be careful with your position on it. I think it's also causes terror. It's a source of terror, which is nice to have for Beastmen, and it's one of the cheaper one, maybe the cheapest one in the army. The other Beastmen monsters are pretty expensive.
That's true.
So it's interesting. I wish it were a little bit faster or a little bit cheaper, maybe. But it's not bad. It's just not as good as I want it to be.
I think that's fair. And that
also, I would like it better if I could put a Beast Lord on the back of it.
I get you, or a Minotaur.
Yeah.
So that's all the units, and I think the units are not the bit of the book that is what we're here to write home about, but that's fine because it's every other part of the journal that I'm excited about. So let's go to the magic items, and we'll just sort of whiz through these. I'll read all of the weapons, and then we can talk about them, because I think they all have various aspects that we can pick out. So the Black Maul, this is the one that we saw previewed on Warcom a couple of days ago, and it's not a two-handed weapon, which I just inserted in there on my first read. So it's a Strength +2, AP3, extra attacks D6 weapon for 80 points, but if you roll a 6 on the extra attacks, you get -1 to your weapon skill. Interesting there, very pricey, but you can take it in a detachment that lets you get extra points worth of magic, items, so you can actually put defense on there as well, which is pretty good. Axes of Gore at 40 points, which I think are very genuinely good. Strength +1, AP -2, extra attacks +1. This one does take 2 hands, and you reroll 1s to wound in combat. So this was described by Callum on the Discord as not OP and not terrible, which I think is a great sort of middle ground to describe it as. The Brass Cleaver at 30 points, probably the worst of the lot, but it's a strength user AP2 magical attacks weapon, and if you roll a 6 to wound, they can't take armor, ward, or regen saves, which is very funny. And this is probably the army that can use it the best, in that you can, put it on something with high base attacks, potentially up to 7 attacks by the time you're adding in frenzy and other sources of attacks there. But it probably doesn't, move the needle too much. And then finally, the Scimitar of Skultar for 25 points. Strength user, AP1, Armor Bane 1, multiple wounds 2. Notably, you can combo AP1 weapons with Gouge Tusks to get a second pip of AP, and suddenly you're in business. You've got an AP2 weapon. What are we thinking about the weapons here?
The Scimitar is the one that's most interesting to me because it's very cheap.
Sure.
And just a baseline, Beastmen need magic weapons to be either quite cheap or really powerful to be worth taking, because foe render is so good. Just having that flat AP2 on your hand weapons, you don't usually take magic weapons on Beastmen characters. But AP1, Armor Bane 1, this is the poor man's Ogre Blade that we wanted. This is much better than Giant Blade. It's a really solid item. I'm not sure I'd want it everywhere, but it's cheap enough that you could run it on like a Gore Bull and be happy with it, or a Doom Bull, or kind of whatever. You want a higher attacks character. The Breath Cleaver, like you noted, not terribly exciting. Axe of Core is interesting at 40 points. It gives you a lot. It's not bad, but I don't know if it's so good that it's like you're getting extra strength, +1 strength and +1 attack, and reroll 1s to wound over a hand weapon, which maybe is worth it for 40 points. But you're also losing the shield. So that one's kind of borderline. And the Black Maul is, I think, the first 80-point big magic item that we've seen in a faction that's not just like a joke.
Yeah.
This thing hits like a truck. And the -1 weapon skill is less painful because you just rolled 6 extra attacks when you got that.
True.
This is the most interesting to me in the Wild Herd because you can put it on a Beast Lord and still take defensive items with it. You'll still have 45 points by defense. That could be really, really interesting. It's tough. The big items are always, you're giving up a lot to take them.
Sure.
But these are all the stats. It's extra attacks, 2 strength, 3 AP, and these 6 attacks is everything you want in a magic weapon, right? That's so good.
Yeah, and
it competes with an Ogre Blade in a meaningful way, which is rare.
I wanna shout out the Axe of Gore for being an extra attack weapon that's worth taking, that's also under 50 points. Because normally you can't take a hero level character that also gets like plus attacks on its weapons, and here you can, and that's just great because that's somewhere that it really shines. If you're going from 3 attacks to 4, that's more impactful than 4 attacks to 5. So I just quite like that.
Yeah, where I think the Axe of Gorgo could be interesting is the Centaur characters. Ooh. Because they start with 4 attack and strength 5, so now you're at strength 6 AP2. Also, they do not have foe renders. They don't get the AP2 anyways. They're kind of already in the market for a weapon of some kind. So now you get that swift strike. Again, you're drunk. There's downsides to this, right? But it kind of has everything that they want in a weapon.
I hadn't considered that. That is
it makes them strength 6 with 5 attacks. That's a lot.
Yeah, and if you take it in the Wild Hunt detachment, you can still take a 30-point magic armor that gives you a ward save.
Yeah, very easily.
Well, let's talk about that then, because it's incredible. This is the thing that we're most hyped to see. Magic armor. It's 2 items condensed into 1 unit listing, and that is because it is Chaos Armor, full plate or heavy, for 40 points or 30 respectively, and it's either full plate or heavy armor. Both can be purchased and worn by a wizard, even if they normally can't, and in addition, they give you a 5-up ward against all wounds suffered. Hell yeah.
This is perhaps the best magic item in the game, and one of the best, or in the book, and arguably one of the better, maybe best magic armors in the game. It's full. Beastmen were starved for full plate, and they were starved for a ward save. We all had to share Talisman protection. There was only one allowed. If you wanted on your Doom Bull, then I'm sorry, your guy on Chariot was going to eat cannonballs like a chump. Now we can all have it. Your wizards can have it. It does not stack with the Brace Staff, as far as I'm aware. No. That would be crazy. But you can get a wizard with strength, with toughness 5, a 3+ armor save if you stack this with the mutation, and a 3-up, 5-up toughness 5 character. That's a level 4 wizard, baby. He is tanky.
Yeah.
But just baseline, it makes all of your characters. It's extremely common. You can kind of fit it in how you want. Usually you want the full plate, but having the option is nice. The ward save is great. It's just very cost efficient. It kind of does everything you want from Beastmen.
For anyone who hasn't played Beastmen, you might not understand why we're so hyped about this. I would pay £5 real money to have Arcane Journal Chaos Armor for Beastmen. Like, if all that came in it was a 40 or 30 point magic item, it said you can put this on your characters, I'd be like, yeah, I'll give you a £5. Like, this is worth it to me. It opens up the character building so much because, as you pointed out, it's been so hard to get ward saves on characters in a meaningful way. You have to pay over the odds for Armor of Ages. Or you're like, oh, well, of course I'm taking the Viletide Caster on a Chariot. Oh, you know what would be great? What if I took loads of War Gore on Chariots as well? Keep them cheap. And then they just immediately get turned into Kindling by any competitive list. Now you just have flexibility to run multiple characters.
This is also really clutch for the Shaggoth, because before you had to either choose between Black and Plate for a 2+ armor or Talisman protection, which again you're taking from somebody else, and then you only have a 3-up, 5-up. Now you just take full plate Chaos armor, and you're great. Yeah. You get the 2+, 5+ of your dream. It's not that expensive. It's literally the perfect item for Dragon Hungry Shaggoth. It's so good on.
Yeah. Fortunately, they printed 2 really good items in one listing, because the next one is not an item. So there's the Fur of Shargu for 20 points. It combos with other armor. The wearer improves their armor by 2 against non-magical shooting attacks.
We're so close.
Yeah. Up until they printed that in the book. Like, what is this?
Yeah. I mean, come on. If it was like 10 points, maybe. But the thing is, what are you taking this on?
Yeah.
It's
or even if it was like +1 to your save against non-magical, or against magical shooting, +2 against non-magical. Like, all the good shooting in the game is magical. Like, almost without fail. Like, dwarves are the exception, and even they have some magical shooting. So
sometimes their cannons are magic too. So it's like,
I don't know what this is, but it's fine. Like,
it's whatever. It doesn't matter because Chaos Armor is going to bring us all home. Warriors of Chaos move over for a Shagoo. Doesn't really matter because we can get 2+ saves pretty easily already.
Whatever. Yeah, that's true. That's the other confusing thing. They made it easy for multiple units to get a 2-up save that could be taking this. And you're like, oh, I'll just do it properly and I'll have it in combat as well. Thanks. Bye.
Yep.
Talismans, Chalice of Dark Rain for 50 points, single use until your next start of turn subphase. If you pass a leadership test, your the range of enemy missile weapons is halved and war machines cannot shoot. Wait, sorry, no leadership test. I've just made that up. Drink it.
Yeah, there's no leadership test.
And guns get half range. War machines turn off for 50 points.
It does not affect magic missiles because they're not missile weapons, but it does affect the Anvil of Doom and the Casket because they are war machines and they cannot shoot, which means they cannot fire magic missiles because they're shooting attacks.
That's funny. I hadn't even considered that. Oh, absolutely seething. Dwarf players in shambles.
Yeah, this is it's expensive, right? This is an investment, but Beastmen are a very short range army. Even their shooting is 15, 18 inches with the short bows, and they need to really get up in your face. This is kind of just what the doctor ordered. Half range shooting is sufficiently close to cannot shoot because the things with really long range are mostly war machines. So what do you have? You got Azrai longbow is 32 inches. It's 16 inches. You just pop this on turn 1. They're not going to be hitting you, except for maybe if they scout something up.
Sure.
This is incredibly powerful. It's not going to be good in every matchup. If you're playing against, Warriors of Chaos, whatever, who cares? Nobody. But if you're playing against Mortuary Cult, it doesn't matter if you can't modify your hit, because just range. You have 15-inch Shabby Grape Bows,
Yep.
and here I come.
The only downside to it is what I call the Falconhorn problem, which is you go, this is a pretty expensive item that has to go on a character. Which character am I dedicating 50 points to? And it's even harder to fit in because it's more points and it is a once per game use. But it's really good, and I think it's going to be, something of a meta call for you. If you expect to see a lot of shooting, this is going to be really good. If you don't expect to see a lot of shooting, obviously there's less value here. But yeah, great thing. Like this is you don't take it in every army, but you're super jazzed to see it when you do take it. So yeah, I like it.
I don't think this is a good idea, but it is funny that you can take this on Dragon Ogre Shaggoth in a chaos list.
That is technically true. Warriors of Chaos also don't love getting shot.
There you go.
Sure. You can not only turn off their casting, you can turn off their shooting as well.
You get nothing. Good day, sir.
Yeah, good day, sir. I said good day. Cornucopia of Corpulence for 30 points. At the start of combat, enemy models in base contact must make a toughness test. If the test has failed, they lose a single wound. It's bad.
Yeah, it is bad. It's got like some utility. The thing is, even against models that it's good against, there's something else you could take that's better.
Yeah.
I think that's really all that needs to be said.
There is an argument you could make that this happens at the same time as when challenges are declared. So as the controlling player, you say, I do this before the challenge and I get combat res outside of the challenge. I don't think that's how it works. And if it is how it works, I don't think it's how any judge will ever rule it in your favor. And also, I think that's stupid. But it is a funny potential interaction.
I think you could sequence it that way.
Yeah.
It feels a little. It's one of those things where it feels like cheating, and it's not worth feeling like cheating over. So maybe just don't.
Yeah, it's also just bad.
It's not good enough to annoy your opponents with.
No. On to the standards. There's some interesting ones in here. I do like these standards. So 50 points for the Gore banner. If you're stacking negatives to leadership, well, if a unit wishes to charge the unit with carrying the Gore banner, it takes a leadership test. If failed, it can't charge. It does not move, and it is considered to have made a failed charge. If it's passed, the unit can charge as normal. You know what's really funny? That's not a terror test. So undead
psychology, undead demons does not matter.
You know what's even funnier about that? You can put it on a unit that you've made to cause terror through perhaps, let's say, I don't know, the whatchamacallit, the spell in the Primal Magic lore. You could be like, okay, make me a leadership test. Okay, you've passed. Now make me a terror test. Or a fear test, I guess, for charging.
Fear test, to charge.
Hold on. What do you mean? This isn't fair. I don't want to make 2 leadership tests to charge you.
Now, this is fun. I think it's 50 points.
Yeah.
And the challenge with this is that there are some other excellent banners in Beastmen. Mm-hmm. Some that you'll start with, like the Poison banner, and then some that we'll see further down this list. I think maybe in the right build, if you're running a defensive list with the Shamans, you've got a lot of negative debuff.
Death Star.
Yeah, Shaman Death Star, I really don't want you charge. I don't know. It's the kind of thing that makes people nervous because they can't plan around it. Like, I've made your Chaos Lord leadership, 8, let's say. What happens if you charge my Ungor Poison Brick? You attempt to charge, so I still get to shoot you. Right, I still get to react.
I don't think so, because it's if you wish to declare
cannot charge. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
but even so, it's one of those like you get to do nothing this turn if you fail, and that's potentially backbreaking. So even if it's a 1 and a 6 on a leadership 9 character, that's really interesting. It's a lot of points, but I don't know, it's something.
If we reach a Death Star meta, potentially, and something like a Minotaur Death Star is potentially playable for whatever layer of rules that get us there. Let's just skip the how and go to the if. The way that you deal with Death Stars is either your own Death Star or charge it with multiple units. What if you go, I need 4 units to kill this thing on average dice, but 1 or 2 of them is going to fail the leadership? I hate that. That makes me very nervous.
Yeah. And it also comes up, there's some things, you don't often have to check the leadership on a Hex Wraith or a Dire Wolf. But
then when you do,
some people are going to plan around being able to charge this unit, and they realize, oh shit, my Hex Wraith leadership, like 5 or 6, it's very low, right? I cannot charge at all. My odds of doing so are close to zero.
Yep.
Razor Gore, random things like that might not be in the general
To be
range at
fair,
all.
every Beastman player knows the leadership of a Razor Gore.
Oh yeah, we roll it
Intimately.
70 times a game for sure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff like that you might want to sink in, maybe to deny dispelling. There's like, I don't know. The more I talk about it, the more interested I am in this banner. I think it's harder to fit in because there are other banners that are very good.
Mm-hmm.
But I can definitely see. I think it's the meta choice. I agree. You won't want this in every list and in every meta, but when it's going to be good, this is going to be really good.
This banner, they just scrubbed it out, but after the words "the Gore banner," they had in brackets, "Watch this space." At some point in the next 6 months, someone's going to do something degenerate with this, and I'm here for it. It might be me, so we'll see. Next up, we've got the Banner of the Warped Moon, 45 points. Command subphase your turn. If you're not engaged in combat, the bearer of this banner may attempt to unleash its power by making a leadership test. Unmodified leadership, so no warband there. If the test is passed, until your next on a turn, enemy units only cannot use the Fly X special rule.
Ed, would you like to know a fun fact?
No, but you're going to tell me anyway.
It takes 121 points to give 5 Best of Gore this, a banner bearer, and veteran.
Yeah.
The notable thing about this is, unlike the Falcon Horn, this is a little bit less crazy because it's using their own unmodified leadership. And Beastman base leadership is quite low. So if you take this on a Gore, for example, your own leadership is 6 in the test. The champion is a 7, the Gore is a 6. Best of Gore or a battle standard bearer are going to be leadership 7. Best of Gore are the most reliable way to do this because they are veteran to roll it. Yeah. But that's quite a point investment into doing that. It's not just something you tuck away in a character. It's something you're investing into, but it is a very powerful effect.
Yep. It's very, like, what beats a bad guy with a gun? A good guy with a gun. What beats a Bretonian player with a Falcon Horn and loads of Pegasus Knights? A Beastman player with the Banner of the Warped Moon. That is the vibe that I'm getting from this. And it's pretty reliable, as you say. If you pay for the Best of Gore, you're passing it like 80% of the time with Veteran on there.
And for Beastmen do not have... They're a limited mobility faction. You don't have a lot of Swift Stride in your more powerful units. Normally, the list I run, the only Swift Stride is a Razor.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of stuff that's move 5, move 5, 6, 7. Not a lot of Swift Stride. And you can really run into problems because not only you're a limited mobility faction, but you're a limited range attack faction. You have to really work for put in the magic and things like that. You don't have access to any innately powerful units outside of characters and spells. Slowing down the pace of the game, preventing people from flying away from you, it lets you pick combats. I think it's especially important for Beastmen because it allows them to control the pace of the game in a way that they couldn't before. It lets you pick those fights, get into range of those flyers that were otherwise running away or wouldn't fight you or whatever. It opens up a lot of different gameplay options.
If we talk about Beastmen being a limited mobility faction, the phrase, if you wrestle with a pig in muck, you've already lost, kind of comes to mind. If you're bringing Beastmen, coming down to the Beastmen level, Beastmen are very good at what they do. So you're not as good at them. You're not as good as Beastmen at doing what they do. So that concerns me as someone who likes playing with flyers.
Yeah, I mean, and then it's all the same things that are good about the Falcon Horn. And a lot of there are some units that are innately move 1, like gyrocopters or the flying chariots and high elves.
No, they're movement 2.
Oh, excuse me, I apologize. And those things again are rough. They're threatening your chaff. They're trying to hit your blocks from the flank. They can be really hard to deal with because you can't pick them up range, and a lot of times their charge range is 2 or 3 inches further than your maximum shooting range, which can make it challenging. So even if you're slowing those units, like Pegasus Knights are not that slowed by it. But other things, like it's a lot harder to coordinate multi-charges with, a couple of Sphinx want to get into you. Well, they're not flying now. This is especially brutal versus undead because when you cannot fly, that also means you cannot march.
Yeah, true.
I
guess Blood Knights get around that, but everyone else can't march. That's true. Tomb King's really suffering there with the Necrosphinxes. Okay. Well, next up, 40-point Beast Banner. The unit carrying the Beast Banner increases the maximum charge range by 3 and gets plus D3 to the charge roll. It's mini Swift Stride. It's quite pricey for mini Swift Stride, though.
That's basically my take. If this was 20 points, you'd be like, that's kind of neat. You're not stacking this onto anything on a cavalry unit where suddenly you can charge crazy. I mean, you can you can put this on Centaur, but they have their own issues.
Sure.
And it also might get them into trouble because sometimes they frenzy them. You don't want them to touch them
True.
20 inches away, but here they go anyway. It's 40 points is a lot.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
That's
and it's
okay.
only on the charge. I don't know. It's not bad.
Yeah, so it doesn't give it on the pursue as well. That's a good point, because that's where like Swift Stride really does help. Because it helps you chase people down. But those are expensive. What if we only have 15 points to spend and we want to take a Raggedy Soiled Tapestry? A unit carrying the Soiled Tapestry gains the Hatred All Enemies special rule. However, all enemy models hate the unit carrying this banner.
I love the flavor on this. I love that it's 15 points. This is rough, man. Especially because Beastmen have Primal Fury, so a lot of times you're already re-rolling ones, assuming you pass that leadership test.
Yeah.
So usually you get less value out of Hatred than your opponent does.
You know,
I can see use cases for this. Tell me.
Centaur. Because we hate them all already, so there's no downside.
Right. Yeah, that's the other thing. Is this could be really valuable on a shock cavalry unit, and Beastmen do not have an effective shock. And frankly, calling Beastmen shock cavalry is
I'm shocked
shameful.
that you called them cavalry.
Because they only have one attack. The other one's a stomp, which does not benefit from hatred.
Yeah.
It's just this is like a glass cannon unit, and Beastmen just don't have any place to put this. There are units in the game of Warhammer, the old world, where this would be excellent for 15 points because you want to get in, do a ton of damage, beat somebody up, and maybe you don't care if you die. And this is just a cheap investment, right?
Yeah.
Beastmen don't have those units.
Can I have this on Wild Riders, please?
Yeah, we could make an exchange. I'm sure you got some shitty magic items that we can swap.
I've got some banners in there that you'd love. Like, do you want a Vanguard move banner? Like, I like it, but it kind of doesn't fit with how I play the army at the moment. I'll trade you a Vanguard banner for Hatred.
Yeah, I think we solved the war between. The cultural exchange is the way forward.
Hell yeah. I definitely am going to put poisoned, like, rose thorns on the handle of that banner so that you die, like, a week afterwards. Typical
Obviously.
elf, shenanigans. But let's move on to the enchanted items, because we've got the Horn of the Great Hunt. For 35 points, you can do the funniest thing. Wait, no, sorry, that's not this one. It's the other musical sounding one. So for 35 points, once per turn, you get to plus or minus 1 to the modifier for ambush. This is like way too expensive for a once per turn thing for something that I'm not super excited about.
I saw a teaser for this and I was like, well, that's pretty cool. I bet that thing's like 15, 20 points. 35 is a lot to only do it once per turn, too.
Yeah, 35 for doing... Oh, pardon me. 35 points for doing it, like, to every unit, I still probably don't take, but if you're going heavy on ambush, you might want to. 10, 15 points, otherwise I could see it, but yeah, it doesn't do it for me.
Yeah.
Scourge of the Burdened, 25 points. Here's the bound spell. Call of the Wild from Lore of Primal Magic as a bound spell, power level 2. Now, this, for anyone who isn't keeping up with all of the names, that's the reserve move spell. So you can just have a banner that gives you reserve move, which I think is interesting. You have to roll.
Not a banner, but enchanted item. It's really...
Sorry, yes.
Yeah. This is excellent. Bound spells are usually pretty good when you can cast them every turn. This one goes off pretty reliably because the casting value for that is an 8. So you're going to hit this on a 6+, same as Ruby Ring. I don't know. This is great. This is another one that can go on Dragon Ogre or Shartax. You can put this on another one you can take in Warriors of Chaos. I don't know that it's good, but you can move with your Warpfire Dragon, which is very funny to me.
It's infantry or cavalry only. But
that's right. Of course you can't. But
you can take it on a Dragon Ogre and cast it on like your big unit of, Warriors of Chaos.
Marauder Cav.
Or Marauder Cav. Oh, you can unreliably give your unit reserve move.
Yeah. The downside is the Shartax is normally like kind of a solo heavy hitter, and it does not have skirmish. So you need to say an arc to be able to target this.
Sure.
And you probably so it's like it's maybe,
but it's a conveyance spell.
That is
so
good.
That's not too bad because
it's not.
You can move first.
You can always turn face first. Yeah, it's got some play. But I think while this is interesting in Warriors of Chaos, maybe in a meta shift, it'd probably be better. I don't know if you really, because most of your stuff is just aggressive, trying to mark and things like that.
Yeah.
In Beastmen, this is just really nice to have. For 25 points, great.
Yeah.
Just be able to pop that on whatever you need to put it on. And that could be Dragon Ogres. Like Chaos Spawn, as mentioned before, so that you don't even have to take Lore of the Wild. You got this on the back end. Now, there's 2d6 a turn is not great, but what if it was 4d6 a turn with 2 pivots? Killing Blow on those guys can really mess somebody up. I don't know. That's like one of those like maybe we haven't seen the meta where those will be good yet, but
Yeah.
if you do, that's a powerful combination.
I think the more I think about this, I like it at first look. I think I'm going to use it less and less as time goes by because I'm going to find that a bound spell level 2 is just not reliable enough for that effect. Like reserve move is something that you want very consistently, but I'm definitely going to play around with it. I'm excited to see what doors it unlocks.
It's cheap enough that I think it's worth messing with.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. You can put it on unit champions, so worth trying. Then we've got the funniest item in the book, Cacophonous Dirge. For 15 points, you turn off all musicians within 18 inches. You don't
Yeah,
get
any
rules.
musicians, right?
Yeah.
Any musicians. Yeah,
Any
that's great.
musicians.
That's gonna be one of those things that's you're gonna have to remind somebody every time.
Yeah.
But it's really funny. It's pretty cheap. I don't know if this is something that I value because it's pretty hit or miss on which armies it hits.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's cheap. It's a pretty big radius. Musicians are probably the most common form of command on like light cavalry and things like that want to flee a charge and maybe it's harder to rally. I don't know how much I value this, but I love that it exists. Very flavorful.
Here's the thing: if you're taking like a brick of gore that you're going to bunker like a Doomball in or something like that, you know what you're not taking on the unit champion? A magic weapon, like a magic item. You can just be like, you know what? For 15 points, you're a little bit worse. And I have to remember it every time, but it's a big aura, and that is really annoying for you. And
there's no conditions on it either. If my unit's running away, they're still making a terrible racket.
Yeah, yeah. I do like the flavor of it in that you can also have a musician and a unit champion. The unit champion has this. You've got a musician with a drum who's doing his best, and then you've got some attention-starved, we'll say, unit champion who just has to be the center of attention, which is probably how they became the unit champion, but making a cacophonous din. And
we have noise marines at home.
Yeah, that's really it. Moving on, we've got arcane items, and we've got the Blood of the Shadowgave for 35 points, a single use. You may use this instead of making a wizardly dispel. If you do so, you flat dispel with no dispel roll required, but you can't dispel a perfect invocation. What? That is
it's expensive.
Really good. Oh,
I don't think you want to stack these, but I like if you can find the points. Having one of these is very powerful because a lot of times there's that one like TMP. I need to get my unit out of dodge. TMP. You're right. Your opponent has one TMP unless you do things like march your big block of bullshit up in front of them and say, just it's like the Richie Yeet. I've moved my dwarf in front of you, and when you try to teleport away, I say no. Now we too have yeet options. So just say, no, you're going to fight me. You can't fly away. You can't teleport away. Here we are. Deal with it.
Yep. No,
that's powerful.
From Arcane Agency. Sucks to suck, buddy. Like, you're not getting it. And if you're playing against, like, dwarves, for example, if they're leaning on the power of their anvil, you can't get a perfect invocation because it's a bound spell. So it's even better against stuff like that. You can just turn something off that's key, and this will win you games if you use it correctly.
Yeah, 100%. Not many armies have this option.
Yeah.
And while dwarves do get it cheaper, 35 points is very reasonable for how powerful this effect is if you time it well.
Absolutely.
Compare this with Dispel Scroll. Yeah, easy.
Speaking of like banger after banger, Demon Heart, 30 points. When you attempt to wizardly dispel, the bearer counts their level of wizardry as one higher than that of the wizard whose spell they are dispelling, or in the case of bound spells, one higher than that spell's power level. Yes, that can mean it's lower than you're normally at. So this is not great on a level 4, but it's not awful on a level 4, because if you think about the armies that we see in the meta, we see lots of level 4 wizards, we see some level 3 wizards, we say no level 2s, no level 1s. So worst case scenario, you're paying 30 points to just be a level 4 dispel. That's fine.
Yeah. I disagree on the level 4 part because it depends on one, Beastmen are going to be running more level 2s with what we've seen here, and it feels bad against them. It also doesn't factor in any of their pluses to dispel. So you might be dispelling at +3, but they're casting at +4 even as a level 2. It also feels bad against Mort Cult, who do tend to run level 1s and 2s because they can stack the pluses.
True, actually, yeah. There is the Mortuary Priest.
So I think, there's definitely advantages to having it on a 24 radius. It might be better on it's on level 3 is where, like, I don't know if you necessarily need one, but if you're playing in a comp that allows one level 3 and level 4, this is not a bad one to second level 3.
Yeah.
But I think this is... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's true. I think this really shines on a level 2, which is, I think, where we were both getting to. Like, that Minotaur General, basically. This is, like, the perfect item for that Minotaur General.
It is, or just to have on. You can just put. You don't have to put it on the Minotaur even. Either you can have it on a Bray Shaman that just follows the unit around. That way, you can still dispel other things, in combat, even when the Minotaur's in combat, but it normally wouldn't be able to dispel. Either way, you can't take level 4s, but it doesn't matter because you've got a little level 5 baby falling around your Minotaur that can stop all the spells at once.
Jeff, I'm disappointed. The obvious answer is make the unit that the dispelling threat is in so beefy that you never get tied up in combat. You win every combat and you're always free. That's the answer. That way you
I
don't.
apologize for not having faith in the Doombull and his herd. The other thing that's really funny with this is it's enough points that you can fit this with Skin of Man. So you can infiltrate, you can scout up with a level 1 shaman 12 inches away from the enemy army and just shut them down on turn 1.
That's pretty interesting.
Now, will that shaman get murdered? Absolutely. But it's like 105, 110 points for the package, which is, again, it's not gonna be good in every matchup, but there are some matchups where they can't really deal with them. You can hide them in rain, whatever, where that can really mess people up when you can stop their shooting, their mobility, their conveyance spells. You can interact with them earlier than you would be able to. And even then, like, beyond just the first turn, you have multiple options where people will try to, sometimes you'll have like a high elf build where the whole point is to not interact with your wizard. They're trying to stay, 30 inches away at all times. This allows you to cast your own spells with your wizards while also having somebody else that can shut down their magic. Because normally you might not be splitting up your characters, but the level 1 running around stopping their spells can be a big threat to do that. This is not something you want in every. It's not an auto take, but it's a really interesting tech. Maybe a meta choice. Maybe something we should figure out. It opens up a lot of possibilities, and beyond that, again, level 1 Beastman Shaman can still cast Vile Tide in a 7+, even without modifiers, which is not bad.
Sure. I think if you're doing that, you can probably find 30 points to make him level 2 if you want to use him a bit more flexible.
Probably, yeah, 100%.
But yeah, okay, that's cool. I hadn't even thought of that. I do like that idea. Rounding it out, we've got Goretooth, 15 points, extremely common. You get to choose spells from the Law of Primal Magic. There's a Law of Magic in here. It's the same as the other two. It's just got a different name. So, yeah, perfect stuff. And that takes us to the end of the Arcane Journal. I think we've gone through pretty comprehensively, but do you have any sort of closing thoughts or things that you want to talk about for the journal?
I'm really excited for what options this list opens up, because I think just the way I'm playing Beastman now, I can make a similar build to one I'm running right now with Poison Archers and the Doom Bull and a couple of Shamans, and I can do that more effectively, and that's great. I'm happy for myself and other Beastman players to be able to do that.
Sure.
But beyond that, this opens up interesting ways of play, especially with things like the Herdstone, the new Lore of Magic, that I think are going to be really exciting to explore how they play, how they interact with other armies. That we're still going to be learning and figuring out, which is a big part of what's fun about Beastmen, is that there's a lot of depth to the army, and we're still figuring out how they play. Even a year and a half into the old world, they've just got a lot to them, and this adds a lot more depth on top of that. I'm excited to playtest all of this stuff to figure out the new lore and how everything interacts. It's really fun.
Love it. I love it when we get to the end of a review and we both feel pretty confident and pretty positive about it. So great stuff if you're a Beastman player. Hopefully you enjoyed that in-depth breakdown. There's going to be more videos every day for the next 5 days. There'll be a video or a stream about Beastman specifically. And yeah, tune in tomorrow, see what we got cooking. Thank you for watching. Thank you for getting to the end of the video. If you've reached this point and you haven't already, I would really appreciate a like, a comment, a subscription if you haven't done those things. It just helps me get seen by more people, boost me up in the algorithm, all of the stuff that the YouTubers do like to say. If you would like to support me in my goal to become a full-time YouTuber, I would absolutely appreciate that. You can become a member below. There are various perks to those. Name at the end of the videos, all that good stuff. But it also unlocks some VIP areas in Discord if you become a Longbeard or Ground Knight tier supporter. Those VIP sections are the only parts that are locked away in Discord. You don't have to be a member to join the Discord. I'd recommend that you should. We've got about 450, 500 people on there. It's a great place for discussion, a lot of fun. I do try and chime in as much as possible. And it's also where the Fix My List show lists are put. And also if you are one of the Ground Knight or Longbeard tier supporters, where you participate in choosing which list I play in the monthly Pick My List series.